have known better to lie to one as beautiful as you. Yeah, I should have known better to take a chance on ever losing you. But I thought you'd understand. Can you forgive me? I should have known better. Should have known better.
And in case you couldn't pick it up from the I by Jim Diamond, he should have known better, or I should have known better, to be more precise. On this day in 1984, so December the 1st, that's right, it is now December. Welcome to the month that brings us the Christmas season. 41 years ago today, Jim Diamond was at number 1 on the UK singles charts with that song, I Should Have Known Better. But here's where the story gets even better. The song stayed at number 1 for just 1 week because following, it was Band-Aid's charity single, Do They Know It's Christmas, that knocked I Should Have Known Better out of the top spot. And then Jim Diamond publicly requested that people not buy his single, I Should Have Known Better, but instead they should go and buy Do They Know It's Christmas and help out with the charity single instead. A charitable guy, that Jim Diamond, number 1 on the UK singles charts on this day back in 1984. As mentioned, December the 1st. Welcome to the program. And gosh darn it, thank you very much for stopping by, spending some of your valuable time with us. I know it's the most valuable thing you've got to give. As much as you may have already purchased on Black Friday or intend to purchase today on Cyber Monday, that time you have is the most valuable thing. You'll spend it with friends and family through the holidays, and you spend some of that time with us every day. And it is very much appreciated. I don't think I say that enough. I could probably spend the whole day expressing gratitude for that, but please know that we are appreciative of your listenership and your interaction on the show. The minute we start every single day, phone lines open up because conversations are always better when they are two-way. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. My beloved and I had the wonderful opportunity yesterday afternoon. What a great way to spend a Sunday. Shoveled first, and then the weather cleared up pretty nicely that we could easily make the trip into St. Jacobs to the Hildebrand Country Schoolhouse, part of the Drayton Entertainment, of course, suite of theaters. And we were able to take in Plaid Tidings at the Schoolhouse Theater. And let me tell you, if you have not yet had the opportunity, what an absolute treat it was. Great show, puts you not only in the holiday spirit, but gives you some laughs along the way and some incredibly talented performers. What else would we expect from Drayton Entertainment, which I learned, by the way, yesterday, has surpassed Shaw, the Shaw Festival in Niagara Region, as one of the largest now theater companies, or in terms of attendance at the theater company, in the entire country. So you got Mirvish, you got Stratford, you got Drayton in at number 3. Very cool little stat. And again, what a show. What a show it was. Plaid Tidings we got to see yesterday afternoon. If you get the chance, please do take advantage of the opportunity. Well worth your time. Also spent some time on Saturday, again, after the shoveling. Isn't it incredible? And I'll get to that in just 1 second. But the difference from the time we left here on Friday until the time we're back in here on Monday. Anyway, on Saturday, after getting the overnight snow from Friday cleaned up, off we went to the Vinox Market, the 5th annual at Concordia Club. It was so nice to see so many of you there. You'd heard about it on the show, or maybe you're just a regular attendee like we are. We've been doing that for a number of years now. Really enjoy it. It's got a nice traditional Christmas feel to it. So we enjoyed our time there, made a couple of purchases, and of course, stopped by to see Fritter Fred at the Fritter House just outside, where he was set up, frying up those delicious apple fritters. And Fred had told us on the show last week that anybody that goes to the market at Concordia Club on the weekend and says, "We heard about your fritters on Farwell's show," you got the Farwell fritter discount. Or no, it was the Farwell fritter bonus. Extra fritters into the box. And Fred said many of you had come by to do that. So way to go. I'm sure it was worth your time. I hope you felt that way. We certainly did once again. And it was great to run into so many of you just out doing what we were doing, taking in a little bit of holiday tradition as that Vinox Market marked its 5th year at Concordia Club. And don't forget, the Scouts Canada trees are in the Concordia Club parking lot. So if you're somebody who enjoys buying your tree annually from Scouts Canada, you'll find them there at the Concordia Club. They've set up shop because they don't have their usual spot on Victoria Street at the Home Hardware anymore. So back to that snow that we got over the weekend. And you'll remember Friday was just an absolute gonger of a day trying to get anywhere. I was talking to our bus driver for the Kitchener Rangers, Mikey the Moose Reeves, on Saturday when we were getting ready to go to Brantford for the Rangers game. And Mike had said he was out late Friday afternoon and got onto the 401 West at King Street by Sports World and had not, I guess, paid enough attention. He was regretting not having had our radio station on for the traffic update because Mike heads west to get to the beautiful village of Ayr where he lives. And once he got past Homer Watson Boulevard, the highway was all the vehicles were being diverted off the highway at Cedar Creek on Friday afternoon. So even though that's the direction he wanted to go, with everybody going there, the backups were incredible because of this awful weather. And Moosey told me it took him more than 2 hours to get from the King Street on-ramp at Sports World onto the 401 West back to his place in Ayr. On the highway just before 5, didn't get home till a little after 7. About 2.5 hours to make the 25-minute trip. What would normally be a 25-minute trip to Ayr. That's how bad things were on the weekend. And I don't know about you, but I'm still feeling it this morning. I was just talking to my coworker, Luke Schultz, who was in with Mark Douglas for All News Mornings today on 570 News Radio, and I am a hurtin' unit. This is the time of year where you recognize there are muscles that you didn't know you had that you put to some level of use over the weekend. But I feel like we're getting into a little bit of a respite now. Yes, there are some flurries this week, and I'll get to more of that in the Farwell Show 5 coming up. But the big stuff that came in very short order over the weekend, thank goodness. And how about surrounding communities, though? One of our regular listeners to Kitchener Rangers broadcasts from up in Bruce County sent me a picture of her property on Friday night. By that time, we'd been buried in more than 30 centimeters, right? And she could still see grass at her place. Incredible. Whatever system it was, it seemed to lock in here around the region. And we took it on the chin, didn't we? And of course, you know that snow events were declared across the region. And when a snow event is declared, Wellesley was first out of the gates. They knew what they were getting. They're preparing for it. When snow events are declared, our municipalities ask us to not park on the street at all. Even if it's otherwise legal, you have to keep your vehicle off the street so the plows can do their necessary work. And wouldn't you know, look, I get it. Not every message reaches every ear, but common sense should dictate at least part of this, shouldn't it? And wouldn't you know, the city of Cambridge shared a little bit of frustration, and good on Cambridge for their social media post, not being as unkind as I would be tempted to be with the driver who left their vehicle on the road and the poor plow. This was in the Preston area of Cambridge. You can tell by the narrower streets. couldn't get around. So the plow has to do this big move around, and it's not the way it's supposed to work. I'll tell you what, if I was that plow driver, I'd be so tempted. In fact, I would probably do that. If you park on the street during a snow event and I'm coming by trying to clean up with the plow and get the streets passable for traffic, and you left your car on the street, I think I would bury you. I really do. I know that's not very nice, but you shouldn't do that. You just shouldn't do that. The pictures are on our Facebook page. Check them out for yourself. Facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. No, the vehicle that was parked on the road during a snow event was not filled in or buried, because the plow operators in Cambridge are far more professional than yours truly. But let me tell you, if I was that plow driver, it would have been a different outcome for that little car. Just remember, when snow events are declared, there's a good reason for it, okay?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9.
All right, let's get to your Farwell Show 5 for this Monday morning, and we'll start at number 1. It's not just the holiday season, it is budget season in the region. Discussions continue in Cambridge as mayoral vetoes to council amendments could come this week. In Kitchener, a budget proposing a 2.2% tax increase will be tabled for discussion this afternoon. And in Waterloo, the 2026 budget proposes a 6.4% tax increase. Number 2, according to Feed Ontario's Hunger Report, a record number of people in this province relied on food banks over the past year, and 1/4 of those who relied on food banks had a job. That's an increase of 83%. We'll get a closer look at the local picture when Kim Wilhelm, CEO of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region, joins us on the show this morning at 10:30. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, if you didn't check everything off of your holiday wish list during Black Friday sales last week, today is your next chance to land that deal. Cyber Monday deals, promoted as some of the best of the holiday season, are expected to keep people across Canada and the U.S. glued to their computers and smartphones today. Experts expect consumers to drive record Cyber Monday spending this year, even amid economic uncertainty. Now, with Giving Tuesday arriving tomorrow, Joan Fisk, the CEO of United Way Waterloo Region Communities, joins our show this morning at 10 to talk about the impact of elevating our generosity. Number 4, it is shaping up to be a messy Monday morning on the roads in parts of this province. Snow squalls expected to drop around 10 centimeters of snow on communities off Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. Here in the region, we are expecting flurries through the week, several centimeters of additional accumulation, but nothing like the more than 40 centimeters of snow that fell from Friday to Sunday. More than 40 centimeters here in the region. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this Monday morning, a concert this week in Waterloo will raise money for hurricane relief in Jamaica. One Love, One World, Canadians for Jamaica happens Thursday night at Maxwell's. Regional artists playing the show include the Bulletproof Brothers Band and Holy Asylum. Details at maxwellswaterloo.com. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Monday morning, the 1st of December. Anyone who has attended a Kitchener Rangers game in the last many months likely has seen or noticed the rather dramatic changes that have happened to East Avenue, one of the main roads that leads you up to what used to be the front doors, right? But the main facade of the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium. Quickly on that, if I can just add, good job by you, City of Kitchener. The blue and red lights that are illuminated on the facade of that Kitchener Memorial Auditorium facing East Avenue, absolutely beautiful. It's just one of those little things. It's a nice thing. And it really makes that building, which is already gorgeous, just pop, especially at this time of year. Way to go, Kitchener. It really looks good. East Avenue, on the other hand, anybody who's driven it to a game has probably noticed how dramatically that road has changed. And I mean, I think I get what the city was trying to do, but I feel as though there is a law of unintended consequences at play here. And I wonder if it's worth taking another look at because, well, listen, something needs to be done. And I'll tell you why. East Avenue's road diet it needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Some love handles need to be trimmed. I'll explain coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Let me start with this, and we'll try to work our way from the top to the bottom here, or maybe the bottom to the top, because we know that our infrastructure in this community is aging, right? Much of it was laid post-World War II, back in the 1950s. So 75 years later, we really have to stay on top of the process of updating what's beneath our roads, right? Those water mains, those sewers, you name it. This is important work that needs to be done. And a friend of mine posted on social media a week or so ago about some concern after there was some reconstruction and resurfacing done on her little street. And I want to emphasize Little Street. If you know Chapel Street at all, it's in an older part of Kitchener, but it is not a street that I would believe in any way, shape, or form to carry an awful lot of traffic. There was a construction project there where they dug down, they replaced those water mains, those sewers, etc. They changed the curbs and some of the stuff. It's what tends to happen. Wider sidewalks, narrower roads, that sort of thing, all designed, of course, to keep traffic moving more slowly. But one of the outcomes was posted signs that no longer permitted parking on the street. And my friend expressed her frustration in this social media post because having that on-street parking was a real selling feature when she moved into the neighborhood. When family comes over to visit, then having that ability to park on the street prevents some of those family members who may have mobility challenges from having to walk too far, that sort of thing. Not much driveway space. The additional parking available on the road was very helpful. Now the city goes and does this underground work, resurfaces the road, changes the curbs and narrows things a bit, and all of a sudden you can no longer park on the road. It sounds like a little thing, and I get it. But again, think of the bigger picture here. How many vehicles are actually traveling this little street in an older part of Kitchener that necessitated the removal of on-street parking? What problem was it that we were trying to solve? Because it doesn't sound as though like there was a problem in the first place. Now, coincidentally, Chapel Street, on its length of several blocks in this older part of Kitchener, also happens to cross East Avenue, which, as you know, and I mentioned before the break, has been undergoing considerable change over the last year and a bit. Right from the city of Kitchener, the plan was to upgrade the existing stormwater, sanitary sewer, and water mains, including additional hydrants as required, curb and gutter, sidewalks to be installed, upgrading the asphalt roadway, replacing all driveway ramp entrances in concrete, replacing the existing cycling facilities, installing or replacing retaining walls, all of this work being done on East Avenue, running basically from Frederick Street almost all the way down to the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium. Again, stuff that needs to be done in terms of maintaining and upgrading that infrastructure. But if you've noticed, if you've driven along East Avenue, you realize that, well, quite frankly, I'm not even sure what the intended outcome was insofar as how vehicles use that road. Probably much like I was talking about on Chapel Street. It's narrower now, which is designed to slow you down, which is fine. I'm all for it. I don't think there's any real need to be doing more than 40 or 50 kilometers an hour along that street. But it is a pretty good connection point, especially taking you to a very well-used facility in our community. But here's one of the other things. So East Avenue always had sidewalks on either side, and it was much wider before this work got done. And I'm pretty sure they're still allowing for vehicle parking on East Avenue. And along with the sidewalks that have always been there, a multi-use path or trail has also been added. So you've got your driveway to a sidewalk right in front of the house, then a grassy median, if you will, and then this multi-use path or trail. It would be my assumption, and I think it's a safe one, that the trail and or path, the responsibility for maintaining that would not fall on the property owner. It would fall on the municipality, right? So the person who has the home on East Avenue still shovels that sidewalk in front of their house, but the path or the trail, that's up to the city to take care of. So this is where we get to the law, what I would call the law of unintended consequences here, because it just so happened that Rosie the pandemic pup and I were out for a little stroll last night, and we were on East Avenue. And the sidewalks were lovely. The folks who own the homes there were doing a great job of clearing the snow. But when we decided we wanted to cross East Avenue and head off into a different neighborhood, the sidewalk, like I said, was fine. But then you're going to cross the street. Now you're going across that multi-use path or trail that the city has created, which was not clear at all. And then further, the plow had come by on East Avenue to clear the road, but there were big chunks of snow at the other side of that multi-use path or trail that Rosie and I had to step over to get across the street. Well, whose responsibility is that? And again, I would have to say it's the city's responsibility. Look, if you want to put a road on a diet, like it seems as though the city of Kitchener has done with East Avenue, fine. Narrow it. Narrow the street for vehicles, add your multi-use path, etc. But then when you come by with the plow, you have to have a plan in place to also come by with the trail plow or sweeper or cleaner or whatever the heck it is, because you can't block access to people trying to cross the street on foot. If I was in a wheelchair, I ain't making it. If I had any sort of mobility issue, I ain't getting over that snow. Little Rosie, she's spry as anything. She just hops right over. I'm less spry, but I could make it. It wasn't that much. The point is simply you have changed the road dramatically. You can't just plow and leave it there. What you're plowing to the side of the road, if you will, is no longer a property owner's driveway or sidewalk. It's your trail. You put the trail there. What are you doing to make sure that the trailway is clear? I've heard similar complaints already about bus stops, which apparently have a 48-hour window for clearance after a snowfall. It just doesn't work for people that actually need to use the bus. Property owners in this town do a great job of clearing the sidewalks very quickly after a snowfall. Some don't, but the vast majority do. City of Kitchener is going to have to figure this out on East Avenue. You put the trail there, you got to have some other machine now come by and clear the trail and clear passage onto the street for people that want to cross because you built the trail, which, furthering the law of unintended consequences, just going to cost us more money now, isn't it? Isn't that wonderful? This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
This is where today's topics turn into today's talking points. It's local and it's Democratic radio at its finest. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio.
Doug Ford's family dentist got over $2 million from the Skills Development Fund. Now, Doug Ford was asked about this story today, and he made it sound like he doesn't know this guy, but the clinic's website literally brags that you can, and I'm going to quote them here, feel as comfortable as the Ford family has during their visits with us. They're advertising it. And since 2022, he's actually donated over $20,000 to the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. And guess what? Then his clinic gets more than $2 million from a fund that is supposed to help create jobs and train workers.
The Mike Farwell Show continues
on 570 News Radio.
The fund is supposed to help create jobs and train workers. Instead, it seems to be funding several people with close ties to the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party or significant donors to said party. That was, of course, Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles, the leader of the official opposition in this province, an impromptu video that she shot on her way to an event the day that the story broke about Doug Ford's dentist. It seems to me that this skills development fund is the gift that keeps on giving for the opposition, and somebody that has been following this story and every other story at Queen's Park for many years, our Queen's Park Bureau Chief, Richard Southern, joins the show this morning. Richard, good morning.
Mike, good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, my friend. Thank you. How are you?
Quite well for a Monday. As you say, never a dull moment at Queen's Park with the drip, drip, drip of this Skills Development Fund scandal.
Well, that's exactly it. And I like to joke in our business, I mean, this is great. It's a gift that keeps on giving to us as well because there's always another angle of it to cover. But we go back. This started with, as I recall, Richard, a Parisian wedding that the Labour Minister may have attended. And here we are now with the ties to Doug Ford's family dentist.
Yeah, David Piccini attending a Paris wedding of a lobbyist who successfully lobbied on behalf of companies for Skills Development Fund money. He was also seen at a Leaf game, platinum seats right against the glass with the same head of these companies that successfully lobbied for a lot of money from this fund. And yeah, you're right. I mean, just last week, this is the latest sort of iteration in the Skills Development Fund scandal that broke with CTV News and the Trillium reporting that Doug Ford's dentist got more than $2 million. His name, Mike, is John McGarrigus, this dentist. He owns a company called JM Dental, which is located literally just a stone's throw from the Premier's house in Etobicoke here in Toronto. The Premier, though, was asked about this at a news conference last week, and he kind of denied that this was his dentist, but he didn't really deny that his family had used it. He said he was going to have to check to see if any of his family members had attended this particular practice. But there's been now a couple of photos released, including a photo that was actually posted on the Premier's website of the Premier with this dentist outside his practice. The publication, The Trillium, had released a video shot back in 2020 of a fundraiser where Ford is glad-handing with this particular dentist. So there are signs they did know each other, Mike.
You talk about those lobbyists, Richard, who successfully lobbied the ministry for funds from this Skills Development Fund. And that's another aspect of this that may get overlooked in some of the more sensational headlines, from Parisian weddings to strip clubs to Ford family dentists. But we've also learned that those organizations who may benefit most from the Skills Development Fund and the money that's available and had applications that outshone others were overlooked by more powerful lobbyists.
Yeah, I mean, this is really what kicked this scandal into the next gear. It was in October that Ontario's Auditor General reported that more than half the time the grants were directed to recipients chosen by political staff and were chosen in a way that the Auditor General says wasn't transparent, wasn't fair, wasn't accountable. A lot of, poorly rated applications were the ones that ended up getting grants. And there were like $750 million doled out to these poorly rated applications, according to the Auditor General. Of course, the minister behind this, David Piccini, he's really denied any wrongdoing, and the Premier has stood by him through all of this, Mike.
So we joke that this is a gift that keeps on giving for people in your industry, our industry. The opposition can keep pounding away on this. But what about the governing Progressive Conservatives, Richard? Has there been any impact on them?
Not if you look at the polling numbers. The polling numbers are still extremely strong for the Premier. This is kind of the Teflon Premier that's been able to shirk a lot of these scandals off. So far, he's been able to do it with the Skills Development Fund. We'll see what happens next, because the NDP has written to the Integrity Commissioner asking for its office to investigate this, and the Integrity Commissioner would have the ability to demand documents and demand interviews from ministers and political staff. We'll see if that leads to something or not. I mean, what this whole scandal to me is missing, obviously, it doesn't look good for the governing PCs, but it's missing that smoking gun where, okay, if you make us a donation, we're going to give you the money from the Skills Development Fund. I don't think you're going to find that smoking gun. A lot of these individuals, like this dentist, probably made donations, I would imagine, to a lot of political parties, maybe to all of them. So, finding that smoking gun that's going to really sink the government on this may be difficult, but we'll see if the Integrity Commissioner picks it up, and maybe that could be the next drip in this story.
And I've heard from supporters of the Ontario PCs who say, listen, there's a lot of benefit that has come from this Skills Development Fund. Everybody's just focusing on these particular more sensational or scandalous stories. So there's that aspect to it as well. But you talked about Doug Ford still standing by his Labour Minister. Is there any indication that David Piccini is going to step down over this?
There's really not. And he has stood up in the legislature day after day and has fielded these nonstop questions from the opposition on this. He's literally answered everything. Hasn't been that available to the media, but he certainly stood up in the legislature and answered every question. The Premier is showing no signs of wavering on this issue. And, they contend, the government contends this is a good fund that has helped to retrain and upskill workers. Even Marit Stiles herself, the NDP leader who you played off the top, has said that she likes the idea of the fund. She just thinks now it's kind of gone wrong with some $750 million perhaps doled out to the wrong recipients. But even the opposition kind of likes the idea of the fund. So the government's standing by it, and so far standing by their embattled minister.
We know when that next drip comes out of the tap, you'll be all over it. Appreciate you making time for our show this morning, Richard. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
All right. Richard Southern, our Queen's Park Bureau Chief with News Radio, joins us to talk about the ongoing. I'm struggling. Is it a full-blown scandal? Listen, when we go from implications that the minister involved in managing this $2+ billion fund was at a wedding in Paris of a powerful lobbyist, and then at a Leaf game with that same lobbyist, and then we've got the whole notion of, and I think when you followed the trail of breadcrumbs on this one in particular, it would be tough to make it stick to a direct sending of funds to a strip club or a strip club operator, but certainly the opposition, and in this case it was the leader of the third party, John Fraser of the Liberals, that made the connection between the Skills Development Fund and the operator of adult entertainment establishments. And now we're here with Doug Ford's family dentist benefiting to the tune of $2 million from this fund that is supposed to create jobs and train workers. A couple of things come to mind for me in this. One is I can't help but wonder, even as Richard points out, the opposition is supportive of the idea of this fund generally. It makes some sense, even if some $750 million of it may have been misallocated. But what this makes me ask in the bigger picture here is if there isn't too much revenue for the government to be dealing with. When you've got funds of this size, it becomes almost easy to funnel $2 million here and $10 million over there and however many million over here, because we're talking $2+ billion, which then leads us to this whole idea. And I recognize it's a tired and well-worn idea, but this is where the ideas come from. If you have a $2+ billion fund to manage, and it's so much easier to lose a couple of million here and a couple more million there, why is there so much revenue? Because clearly all of this revenue being collected is not going to its intended purpose, which is creating jobs and training workers. So maybe, just maybe, the government is collecting too much from us, that they're not being good stewards because they have so much of that revenue. Again, understanding that it's kind of tired and well-worn, but this is where the sentiment from the tax-paying public comes from, right? We don't always feel as though we are seeing our money that's been collected for various purposes allocated wisely, certainly not allocated in a way that we would support. That's one aspect of all of this. And the other for me is, you heard Richard make reference to the rather Teflon nature of Doug Ford. Not much sticks to him. And he continues, according to the polls, to enjoy pretty strong support from Ontario voters. So even if you are the opposition and you want to keep hammering away on this skills development fund and you want to get the integrity commissioner involved, perhaps, it doesn't seem like much can dent the stranglehold that this government currently, or this party currently has on political power in this province. The opposition just doesn't seem to be effective enough or gaining enough traction. I'm always interested in your perspective on these things. The word, you'll remember, NDP leader Marit Stiles got herself deliberately, I'll remind you, but still got herself kicked out of the legislature the other week for calling the premier corrupt and not withdrawing the comment. Do you have the sense? That's a pretty strong accusation, but it's one thing I'll say for sure. I think this particular progressive conservative government is anything but conservative the way they spend money. There is nothing fiscally conservative about this government at all. Do you have any concerns with the party in power here in Ontario? Again, corrupt is a strong word. If you feel that way, by all means, let me know. But does this skills development fund or anything else the premier has done or is proposing to do, is it a concern to you? Phone lines always open for your thoughts on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
What this whole scandal to me is missing, it's missing that smoking gun where, okay, if you make us a donation, we're going to give you the money from the Skills Development Fund. I don't think you're going to find that smoking gun. A lot of these individuals, like the Stentis, probably made donations, I would imagine, to a lot of political parties, maybe to all of them. So, finding that smoking gun that's going to really sink the government on this may be difficult, but we'll see if the Integrity Commissioner picks it up, and maybe that could be the next drip in this story.
That is Richard Southern, our Queen's Park Bureau Chief for News Radio. The next drip in the story, when it comes out of the tap, will be covered, as it always is, by Richard, who does excellent work on our provincial political file here for News Radio. What we're talking about specifically is the Skills Development Fund, which is supposed to be creating jobs and retraining workers. It's a fund that, in theory, is supported by the opposition, but in practice seems to be having a difficult time ensuring that the money gets to the appropriate parties. The word corrupt has been thrown at the premier by the leader of the opposition, a label for which she got tossed out of the floor of the legislature, or off of, I suppose, the floor of the legislature, because she refused to withdraw it. I think it's a strong accusation to make, but I wonder how it is that you feel about our provincial government today, especially around this Skills Development Fund, which seems to me to be too big to manage. And if you have too much money in the fund to manage it appropriately, maybe you are collecting too much money from Ontarians. Just a thought. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Let's start it off this morning with Mike, Farwell's Force member number 37. First of all, good sir, how are things up Bruce County way?
Mike, we didn't get hardly anything, to tell you the truth. We got maybe, I would say, 3 inches of snow.
You're so lucky. I heard there might be more on the way today. Is it good out there right now?
No, it's just a light flurry, Mike. It's nothing really to write home about. But the biggest problem up here is when the winds get up.
Yeah, for sure.
And the visibility goes in the tank. That's the biggest problem.
Appreciate that. So on Doug Ford and this provincial government.
Mike, as you know, I was a project manager for a major multinational corporation. And I'm looking at this shaking my head in a number of ways. The first one is they don't seem to have a code of ethics. Like, would not be allowed to go to a hockey game with a supplier or whatever, unless I got approval from a vice president or something like that. So there are certain lines that I did not cross. The other thing is when, let's say I had a friend or who was a member of the supplier and I was managing the project, I would have to declare a conflict of interest. And I wouldn't be allowed to judge that supplier because I had a conflict of interest. So there are some simple things that I think that is very much missing here on this. And one of the things is on some of the larger projects that I worked on with my friend, we had a large steering committee. It wasn't just one person making the decision. So I can tell you lots of times there are conflicts of interest from steering committee members, and they declared them, Mike. It seems like this government just doesn't have any good modern-day ethics and conflict of interest rules going forward. And I agree with you, not one person should be responsible for $2 billion, Mike. This should be really like a cabinet committee to provide on this. The second thing why I believe the opposition is so ineffective right now is because when we had the e-health, we had gas line scandals, we had the Windsor Parkway, yada, yada, yada. The NDP is very selective in who they call corrupt. So some people are just rolling their eyes and going, well, the Liberals cost us more in scandals than Doug is right now. But I think what we really need, Mike, instead of having a integrity commissioner, ethics commissioner that have no power to do anything, I think we need a special prosecutor to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen and there's actual criminal penalties for violating conflict of interest rules. That's my thoughts, Mike.
All right, Mike. Appreciate the call and the thoughts. You get me thinking about something else. Your thoughts prompt more thoughts from me, and that is around the safeguards and or accountability associated with any problems with the allocation of the funds. For example, if this seems to be a little bit of pay for play, you donate to our party, we make sure that your business gets skills development funds. If that turns out to be a genuine conflict of interest here that puts the labor minister in a bad spot and thus the government, where's the accountability for that? I think in Mike's example, when he's operating these large budgets and projects for a private employer, if you misallocated some of those funds, surely there would be consequences for it. And maybe that's why the opposition continues to call for Labour Minister David Piccini's resignation, which has not come. But I would like to think that there is some guardrail around the allocation of these funds. And if the funds are misallocated, then there is a consequence for that. And currently, that doesn't seem to be the case. I'll just say again, and it's been one of my frustrations because I felt as though we really did need a course correction in the province fiscally. And when Ontario Premier Doug Ford came into power back in 2018, you'll remember him talking about efficiencies, asking every department to find 4% savings. We're going to have hamburgers and hot dogs, and we're going to flip them. Everything's going to be leaner and meaner. And it's been anything but lean. Everybody's got a minister's title or a junior minister or I forget all the different titles, but it's the biggest, most bloated caucus that we've ever seen. It's a bigger premier's office that's costing us more than we've ever seen. We get goofy rebates on driver's license renewals, plate renewals, all these different things that could be money used for really effective things in this province. And I don't think we're managing it fiscally very well at all. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, Mark's lead story a moment ago says it all, doesn't it? It's Cyber Monday, which is the weekday following Black Friday. The American Thanksgiving weekend is the opening bell for the holiday shopping madness. And hey, I take some comfort in the angle of that story that Mark shared, that many of us are thinking of keeping our dollars domestic this year. Let's shop Canadian, shop local, even better. I'm a big proponent of that. Of course, we are going to be buying gifts for people that we love and maybe even just like a lot this year, and that's okay. But in the midst of it all, the community that we live in, can we do something to elevate the existence for others in this community that we so love as well? Joan Fisk is the CEO of United Way Waterloo Region Communities and joins us for a conversation. Joan, it is great to get you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning.
When we are in this time of year where Black Friday leads us into Cyber Monday, it's all about this deal, that deal, and the next chance that we can put down our credit card for something else. How does somebody in your line of work as our CEO at United Way Waterloo Region Communities feel? What do you reflect on?
Well, I reflect on a lot of things on a day like this. Tomorrow's the day. It's a global day. It's a global day of giving. And it's something that we kind of look back on, and it skims over our mind. We've been very focused on all sorts of things, even when you talk about giving, and giving is important. But giving to your community is also important. It makes you feel really quite great. I often think that greatness doesn't come through accumulating a whole bunch of wealth or power or recognition. It really comes from something really deeply personal inside of you. And I can't take credit, of course, for even the idea of global giving. But what we can think about is the world that we live in that big, broad sense, is fraught with issues and anxiety. But closest to home, we can make a difference. If we give just a little bit, we can lift up our community in ways that we don't really see. United Way is pretty complicated. It's a big umbrella organization that we donate to about 60 to 90 charities a year, depending. And we try to get the most impactful money to the most dangerous and very, very worrisome situations, as well as ones that are uplifting. So I'm hoping and thanking you to talk about this today, that we could have just a little bit of that extra give to your community this particular Giving Tuesday.
There's no question, Joan, that the amount that we spend as consumers on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, et cetera, absolutely dwarfs the amount annually contributed on a Giving Tuesday. But even having said that, what do we know about the impact of those tens of millions of dollars that do get donated on Giving Tuesday?
Well, I think that there is many organizations that would report back on the impact of this. In our case, we have a $50,000 match from a very generous donor who has really tried to inspire the community to take up that challenge and have him give all of that $50,000 if we can actually come up with that much money. We will take that money and divide it into 4 or 5 different areas of concern, particularly this year. Housing, of course, continues to be one of the biggest drivers of difficulties in our region. We know that people are living where we see the tents and things, but we also know people are living in much more precarious situations where they're housed in places that aren't safe. Children particularly need to get this support and help and nutrition. So we do focus a lot on that, the tail end. And poverty it's a very, very difficult, holds you in for generations situation. So we work hard, and I work hard to explain to people the why. Why give to your community? Because although we can give to lots of things, and I encourage people to give to lots of things if they can, but try to remember here is where we live. This is where we'll make a safer community, safer for our upcoming generations and for those who live here and want to feel comfortable and safe and go out for walks. And that's what I feel at United Way, especially this time of year.
And I think one of the important messages around all of this, Joan, is the more people that we can reach with a conversation just like this, then that multiplication factor, right? Where even, a little bit here, because if a little bit here is coming from here and here and here, all of a sudden we've got a real movement happening.
It is, and that is the model of the United Way. And it's hard to understand whether to give to United Way or to give to something specific. I encourage people to give no matter what. But if you could see a little bit of your donation to go to United Way, which will go directly to your community, does stay local. And speaking of shopping local, what a better way to shop local than locally shop your charity, and give our community a little bit of a leg up.
What drives you and the folks at United Way Waterloo Region communities to keep doing the work that you do?
Recently, we had a number of our agencies pop into the office for a conversation about funding. Where is it going? How do we work together to create even more of a movement? And I was looking at some of the folks sitting there and really heartened by the stories they tell about that little bit that made a difference to someone's life. And when you hear those stories about someone's ability to potentially even have better food, but not just food, emotional support, friend support, circle of friends support, these are the things that drive us. We see it in front of us where it makes a difference. We wish we could do more, of course. We wish we could do more to make people smile more, because there's a lot of worry out there. And our job is to try and put some smiles on people's faces when we can.
I know that you do just that. It's a great organization full of great people doing terrific work, Joan. Thank you very much for making time for us this morning.
And thank you for making time for us today too, Mike. We appreciate it.
Always happy to. Look forward to our next conversation.
Take care.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye. Joan Fisk is the CEO at United Way Waterloo Region Communities, and just reminding us that tomorrow, after the Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales have subsided, it is Giving Tuesday. Just by the numbers, okay? If we look at Canada Helps as the data provider, we found that on Giving Tuesday a year ago, more than 6 million Canadians made donations through the online platform that is Canada Helps, with an estimated $43 million in total being donated across Canada. Not a bad number, $43 million across Canada, one day, Giving Tuesday. Having said that, if you look at the amount of money being spent on Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales, it was $9.3 billion. So $43 million donated on Giving Tuesday and $9.3 billion spent on Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales. Look, the point of this is not to make anyone feel guilty. I hope you did find a sale, or do today find that bargain that is exactly the thing you're looking for exactly the person that you want to give it to. That is okay. Can we find a little something after we're done with all of that today to remember that there are organizations in our community that are in need? You heard Joan describe the United Way Waterloo Region Communities being that umbrella organization that doles out to dozens of local charities. And this is an example of ways that money donated locally can make a difference. $50, for example, could provide a healthy meal to 6 homeless or at-risk youth in our community. $100 could support 5 people who are experiencing homelessness in our community find alternatives to emergency shelters. $2,500 could support 1 individual in achieving independent, safe housing by transitioning out of emergency shelters. So there is tremendous need. We know that. We heard from Food Banks Ontario this morning with its report, an 83% increase in the number of people accessing food assistance who already have jobs, which is a pretty staggering number and pretty sobering to think about, isn't it? So if we can find a way, when Giving Tuesday rolls around tomorrow, I think you're going to find an awful lot of matching donation opportunities, including what Joan just talked about, $50,000 of matching at United Way Waterloo Region Communities. And maybe you can find a way to keep those donations that we will make on Giving Tuesday a little bit closer to home. I have a feeling there might be some Farwell for hire opportunities for Giving Tuesday tomorrow as well. Just something for us to keep in mind to help others in our community once we're done helping ourselves to some sales, because who doesn't love a good bargain on Cyber Monday? This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Why give to your community? Because although we can give to lots of things, and I encourage people to give to lots of things if they can, but try to remember here is where we live. This is where we'll make a safer community, safer for our upcoming generations and for those who live here and want to feel comfortable and safe and go for walks. And that's what I feel at United Way, especially this time of year.
Joan Fisk is the CEO at United Way Waterloo Region Communities, joins us to talk about the impact we can make right here in our own backyard. It is Cyber Monday. Everybody's looking for that next great deal on something they can buy. Following Black Friday, we are absolutely into the holiday shopping season. My beloved and I were talking about it on the weekend. It is that time of year. And it's okay. Enjoy it. Fill your boots with all of the best stuff. And as we are doing so with an eye to keeping our money domestic, shopping Canadian, shopping local, we can donate locally as well. Tomorrow, following Black Friday and Cyber Monday, is Giving Tuesday. And we will absolutely share with you more about that through the day tomorrow. And I got a message about the campaign for our Waterloo Region Health Network Foundation. And it's important to let you know that they have a campaign for their neonatal ICU, the NICU, which is going to have all donations to the NICU topped up by an extra $1 for every $2 donated by John Baker, who's the founder and CEO of Desire to Learn, or D2L as we know it in town. His own daughter's experience in the NICU at the Waterloo Regional Health Network years ago, 9, in fact, years ago, inspired him to provide this top-up gift. And, you know, there's one of our local tech companies or business success stories. Doesn't get talked about as much anymore, maybe because it's so well established. But John's been doing some great work in this community, not just building D2L, but in giving back in this way. So for all donations made through the Waterloo Regional Health Network Foundation tomorrow to the NICU, for every $2 donated, an extra $1 will be added by the founder and CEO of D2L, John Baker. So just another way for our money to stay local and support families locally, just like John's family was supported 9 years ago when his daughter was born. In light of all this, I'm thinking on a column I wrote for the Waterloo Region Record last week, and I got some interesting feedback on it, and I wanted to share a little bit more about that. The argument I made in my column was that we should provide at least one day per week free transit for seniors. I think this is something that, frankly, should be a no-brainer. And if we're worried about the cost of providing such a service, a whole day, imagine that, of free transit to seniors, we could easily generate the revenue by, putting advertising on our ION trains, which we remain opposed to doing in this town, and I don't know why. As far as I'm concerned, you're leaving money on the table, money that could be used to, for example, provide at least one day of free transit to seniors. I think there are myriad benefits to this, right? Because as people get older, they are less likely to be driving for any number of reasons. So allowing that free transit allows those older adults to get out, get errands taken care of. They have this sense of independence that remains, even if they just want to use it to go and meet with other older adults at a place convenient for transit. You are decreasing the amount of isolation they feel. I think there are myriad benefits to this. Some of the feedback, though, I received in regard to this was quite interesting. And some flat out said it's a ridiculous idea because you don't need to provide free transit to millionaires. And I get that argument for sure. Many seniors today are living very comfortable lives. And if they are even inclined to take transit, they can certainly afford to pay the $3.50 or it might be up to $3.75 fare to ride it. I get that. And it is an absolutely fair argument to be made that most seniors, right? We talk about the boomers all the time and the wealth they have been able to generate and how they still get Canada Pension Plan and old age security payments that are not means tested. Everybody just gets them anyway, et cetera, even if they don't really need them, just like free transit. I think that's a very fair point to make. And there is a program that exists that you can get subsidized transit fare if you are a lower income older adult. The problem with that program, though, and it's been documented, by people who would know really well, and I'll point to Brian Paul, the executive director at Supportive Housing of Waterloo, navigating the system to apply for the subsidized fares is very difficult to do. Some people just give up. They can't even do it. So I don't think that system is exactly equitable. But the other thing I would point out in this is while most seniors today may be comfortable, if not wealthy, the seniors of tomorrow aren't going to be the same. I'm talking about myself here. I'll put myself in that category. Not a senior yet, but not all that far away. And I can tell you right now that I'm not going to be a millionaire senior unless I win the lottery, right? I am very fortunate to be living in a house, but I don't own the house. The bank still owns the house. I'm still paying off a mortgage. So great. Someday I will presumably have that house paid off, but I'm not going to be sitting on $1 million plus the value of my home. And I think we have to consider tomorrow's senior as well. And frankly, if you're concerned about millionaire seniors taking advantage of a free bus trip, how many are actually going to do that anyway? Right? If they are incredibly comfortable, I would suspect many are not even in need of the use of free transit. But even if they did, so what? Another bum on a seat of a bus, I can't imagine being something that is backbreaking to Grand River Transit. So yes, I hear you. And I understand that seniors today, many are probably very comfortable. Number one, not everyone is. And those who are not have a very difficult time navigating this system that they have to use to apply for subsidized transit. And number two, we're talking about seniors today. What about seniors tomorrow who will not have the same wealth accumulated by the time they are in their retirement years? Are we thinking about that, which is tied into the broader conversations we have been having in this country about our not aging, but aged population? We are aging quickly, if not we have already aged in this country. Are we putting the necessary programs and policies in place to account for that? This would be something very simple at the local level that we could do today to ensure that seniors tomorrow have some at least similar opportunities as seniors today. What is that about intergenerational fairness we talk about an awful lot when it comes to our budgets? This would be a way to ensure another level of intergenerational fairness, because I know, just as the next cohort of seniors, that I will be in no way as comfortable as my parents. I don't think I'll have to rely on a food bank like Feed Ontario's hunger report told us this morning, but I'm also not going to be sitting on a multi-million-dollar nest egg, and I think we have to keep that in mind. An update is on the way from the 570 News Centre, and then speaking of that Feed Ontario hunger report, what are things looking like locally? We're going to get the perspective of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region, its annual community impact report, and what it's telling us about food insecurity. That's coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, the timing could not be much better on the heels of Feed Ontario's hunger report that we were reporting on this morning with All News Mornings. to have our good friend Kim Wilhelm in studio with us. Kim is the CEO at the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. Good morning. Nice to see you.
As always, it's a pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
And Kim brings along with her today a friend. Julie Millard is here, VP Corporate Citizenship at Open Text. Julie, thanks for coming in.
Happy
Welcome.
to be here. Happy to be here, Mike.
Great to have you here. Kim, let me start with you if I can, because we've got a number of things to talk about. First of all, the Community Impact Report for the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. And we've got Giving Tuesday, which I know Julie is involved in. But let's start with the numbers this year, Kim, in that Community Impact Report, because it paints a pretty vivid picture here. Food distribution is one I want to focus on. What stands out to you?
We distributed a record amount of food last year, 9.6 million pounds of food, in fact, between July 2024 and June 2025. That's a 7% increase over the previous year. And it's moved through 61 partner organizations right here in the Community Food Assistance Network in Waterloo Region. And what's really important is that about 60% of that food is fresh or frozen, which many people I don't think realize. And that's exactly the kind of food that households need most. Nutritious, wholesome options that can help families put healthy meals on the table each and every day.
And beyond just the region of Waterloo, Kim, I know that the Food Bank of Waterloo Region is supporting smaller food programs right across southwestern Ontario.
We are. One of the important parts of our work that we do is to make sure that food reaches communities that need it most, right beyond our region, as you mentioned. And that's through our Feed Collaboration program, which is part of a larger Feed Ontario initiative. Food producers throughout southwestern Ontario donated 1.2 million pounds of food last year. And we take that food and share it with smaller food banks and community programs beyond our regional borders. Now, I do want to make one thing clear. Anything that's collected here in Waterloo Region stays in Waterloo Region, and that's distributed to our 61 partner agencies in the network. But beyond Waterloo Region, many of these organizations, they don't have the storage capacity or transportation resources that we do. So this partnership really helps ensure that nothing goes to waste.
Okay, so let's focus then here on the region. And when it comes to food assistance, you mentioned those 9.6 million pounds distributed. How many people relied on food assistance in the region last year?
Our network partners supported nearly 73,000 individuals right here in Waterloo Region who are facing food insecurity. And within that number, there's about 26,000 children who are living in food insecure households. And that's the part that really stuck with me.
Okay, so this level of demand has got to be putting pressure on the system. Are you seeing more people, Kim, in need of long-term support from the food bank?
So those 73,000 individuals accessed a food assistance program more than 622,000 times last year. And to put that into perspective, that's up about 205% since 2019. So that really does tell us that people are needing to access food assistance more and more, and we're not simply a temporary measure anymore to get somebody through a difficult time.
One of the other numbers that we're seeing is in the number of families visiting hamper programs, which is actually showing a small decline. Is there a glimmer of hope we can take from that?
We're hoping, but I can tell you, unfortunately, while these numbers go to the end of June, this fall we're seeing new record-breaking numbers again. So I really hope so much, Mike, that we are starting to see the decline in things, but I think that we need a little bit more time before we can confirm that.
Obviously, the food bank relies on the donations that it's able to collect and the volunteer engine that's behind this, Kim, to keep things running. What can you tell us about the impact that volunteers make?
Volunteers make such an incredible impact. They're the heart of everything that we do, if I'm going to be honest. Whether they're helping out at events, sorting food in our warehouse, packing hampers, or driving across the region to pick up donations. It really is an incredible effort that keeps moving food where it's needed most.
Yeah, they're so incredible at what they do. And then it comes to those food and financial donations I mentioned too. I know that our Waterloo Wildfire Ringette teams, for example, at Rim Park on the weekend were collecting food and financial donations. How important are those to what you were doing today?
I've said it before that it really is that community impact, that community effort that makes us be able to do what we do. People donate through food and fund drives, whether it's through a sports team, a corporate office, whether it's through a sponsorship donation. But it's really, really important that everybody comes together to do this work, because it's the 73,000 individuals that it's reaching most.
Behind the numbers in the impact report, we also get some really impactful personal stories. And the stories are what shapes, I think, the work that you do and the impact that you have. What are we hearing by way of those stories?
It really does remind us why we're here. And I encourage you to go and read the full report. But, Alicia, who's one of our monthly donors, or Kevin, a longtime volunteer, but also the stories of individuals where we're changing their lives because of the food that we're providing.
Where can folks go if they want to look at the numbers more closely, see this community impact report for themselves?
thefoodbank.ca/community impact.
All right. Thefoodbank.ca, great website at any time. Thefoodbank.ca/community impact. Julie, let me swing it over to you, because I wanted to make sure we painted that picture for the community from this 2025 impact report. But community support means so much. And I know Open Text has been a longtime supporter of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. And that support over those 25 years, what has that looked like?
Absolutely, Mike. Well, the Waterloo Region isn't just where Open Text was founded. It truly is the heart of our story and very much our home. So supporting this community is core to who we are. And our longstanding partnership with the Food Bank of Waterloo Region is something we're really deeply proud of, and reflects our commitment to showing up for our neighbors and making a real impact where it matters most. So every year, Mike, we run our holiday food bank campaign, and it's something all of our employees really rally behind. We encourage them to give, whether that's through donations or rolling up their sleeves to volunteer. We're consistently inspired by how generous they are. And together, through financial donations, fund drives, volunteer hours, OpenText has helped provide more than 1.4 million meals to the people right here in Waterloo Region. And it's something we're so proud of and committed to continuing that support for many years to come.
That's got to feel great. 1.4 million meals over the years. It sure does. It would. Kim, tomorrow just so happens to be Giving Tuesday. I know there are a number of appeals that are associated with that. What does a Giving Tuesday campaign look like for the food bank?
Yeah, Giving Tuesday is a global day to celebrate the generosity and make a difference right here in our communities. It's a chance to give back, whether you're donating, volunteering, or spreading kindness in small ways. And for the food bank, it's a way to make sure that everyone in Waterloo Region has access to the food they need. And this year we are collecting donations to help programs like our mobile pantry bring fresh, frozen, and non-perishable food directly to our neighbors. Since 2021, the mobile pantry has been visiting local programs every week, reaching dozens of households and making food support more convenient and welcoming. So this Giving Tuesday, our goal is to raise enough support to provide 300,000 meals to people who need it most. And every donation helps make that possible.
You know, Julie, I'm thinking on 25 years of support with OpenText, those 1.4 million meals that employees have been able to support people in this community with over those years. But you're going to be right there, OpenText again on Giving Tuesday tomorrow.
We're right there, Mike, and we're really excited. So beyond our employees' donations and volunteer time, we're so proud to serve as the Giving Tuesday match sponsor again this year. And we're pledging up to $40,000 to double the impact of every single donation, turning community generosity into even greater support for our neighbors here in the region. So normally every dollar donated to the food bank provides 2 meals, but with the OpenText match, that same dollar can provide 4 meals for people accessing the mobile pantry. So it's a great way to show that every contribution counts. So please join us. People can donate at thefoodbank.ca/Giving Tuesday and really make a difference. So join us.
I love that. I love it. It's like a quarter a meal right there, 25 cents. $1 gets 4 meals thanks to the match. That's thefoodbank.ca/Giving Tuesday. Julie, thank you on our behalf from the community to OpenText for this $40,000 match and helping out the food bank over all of these years. Really appreciate it.
Very welcome.
And Kim, keep up the great work. Keep that volunteer engine, the coal burning in there. And I look forward to our next chat.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Kim Wilhelm is the CEO at the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. Julie Millard, VP Corporate Citizenship at Open Text. Remember, thefoodbank.ca/Giving Tuesday, a $40,000 match from Open Text tomorrow. Your dollar makes 4 meals in this community. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It is the annual KW Kiwanis Music Festival. And registration is opening with a fundraiser just around the corner. The coordinator of the annual festival, Danielle Beck, joins us this morning to talk more about it. Danielle, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How about yourself?
Good. I'm just excited to share about our upcoming event.
I am
this coming weekend. Yeah.
Really happy to hear more about it. And before we get into the event, can we get a little background about what it's actually for? The KW Kiwanis Music Festival. What is it? How did it start?
Well, the festival itself is an annual event that's been happening almost 80 years, since 1948 in our area, and it's really just this wonderful opportunity for music students to come out, perform, share, get valuable feedback from qualified educators, and they're also eligible for any number of awards, scholarships, and just various ways that we can recognize their achievements. But more specifically, in the last couple of years, we started what we're calling the Music Education Fund. So this is a project of the festival where we're raising money for kids that might not be able to afford music lessons. So I think it's just really important that talented kids have the opportunity to study with a good qualified teacher so that they can have access to events like the Kiwanis Music Festival.
I love to hear it, and I think it's such an important thing that perhaps gets overlooked sometimes, the opportunity for a child to participate in anything, really. Athletics is great, but I love the arts, and music can just provide so much, can't it, Danielle?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for some people, especially those who maybe are struggling and maybe aren't living with some of the privileges other people enjoy, music can really be a healing source, and it helps build resilience. And we know it just supports learning in all areas, not just in music. We really want to look for those kids that are just excited to play music and want this opportunity.
So you mentioned that fundraising event that's coming up this weekend, Sunday, December the 7th. Tell us more about it, please.
So we're hosting a fundraiser concert and silent auction at the Jazz Room in the Hoother Hotel. So this is going to be starting at 4 o'clock. Doors will open. And then we have an entertainment lineup starting at 4:30. And we're excited to give some of our festival students the opportunity to perform. So we're going to see some of the students who come out to the festival each year. We'll also hear some of our bursary recipients performing. And then we're going to have our headliner come on stage, and that's Shane Goose. And he's going to be playing with some of his musical guests throughout the night. And he's going to be leading us in a fiddle jam, which I'm really excited about because new this year in the festival, we're going to be offering fiddle classes. So this is a fun way to kick off our new fiddle program. And for those of you who don't already know Shane Goose, he is a fantastic local musician. He's a Canadian Country Music Award winner. He's released several albums with his band, the Western Swing Authority, and they've toured all over North America. So we're really, really lucky to have him headlining this event for us.
Are we ever? That is such a talented musical family. We're so lucky to have them here.
We are, yes. Yes.
Oh, so you mentioned Sunday at the Hoother. What are the hours? How much will it cost us to get in?
So tickets are $35. and you can get them on Eventbrite. So if you just search Kiwanis Music Education Fund on Eventbrite, I'm sure you will find us. So this is going to get you in the doors at 4 o'clock. Again, like I said, music will start at 4:30. Shane Goose will be starting his program at 5:30, and then we'll wrap things up at the end of the evening with a silent auction. So throughout the musical events, you can bid on items. For those of you who haven't been to the Jazz Room, really, really lovely venue where you can come and enjoy a nice meal while watching the musical entertainment as well.
How much are you hoping to raise?
I'd like to see us get. I'd really like to see $4,000 or $5,000 come in the door between our ticket sales and our silent auction. And we're already, we've had a huge contribution to that goal already. Cook Homes is sponsoring the events, and they've made a very generous donation. But essentially, we need the money to keep the kids in music lessons. So to give a little context, last year we were able to support 11 kids throughout the 2024-25 school year. So 11 kids for a year receiving music lessons. We've kept those kids in our program for this year, and I'm still getting calls from people wanting more information for new kids to join. So we really need the funds to continue to support that.
We will encourage as many people as possible to be at the Hoother on Sunday. Doors at 4, music starting at 4:30, silent auction as part of it as well. And if we look up Kiwanis Music Festival on Eventbrite, we'll find it.
Yeah, so I think the header comes up as Kiwanis Music Education Fund. So if you type those words in, I am sure you'll find us. You can also go onto the festival website. So we're at kwkiwanismusicfestival.com. So there's more about the fundraiser event on our homepage. And there's as well, for those of you who can't make it to the event but still want to support this amazing cause, you can go to our sponsors page and click on, there's a button that says click here to make a donation. It'll take you to our Canada Helps page. So we'd really appreciate any donations that people are willing to make, and this will you'll be given a charitable receipt with that as well.
Danielle, keep up the great work, and thank you very much for joining our show this morning.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Danielle Beck is the coordinator of the annual KW Kiwanis Music Festival, their fundraising event in support of the music education program and helping those kids have access to music lessons. Is coming up on Sunday from 4 until 7:30 at the Jazz Room on King Street North in Uptown Waterloo, which, of course, is connected right there to the Hoother. Shane Goose is going to be the feature headliner. He's great. The entire Goose family, frankly. I'm sure you've heard them play at some point over the years, and Shane's going to be there putting his talents on display for us to enjoy and helping out with this fundraiser that will also include a silent auction. So visit kwkiwanismusicfestival.com. More information there. Chance to get your tickets, $35 to get you in the door, and you can even get the link to make a donation if you can't be there. But I can't speak highly enough of the opportunity that music lessons and music generally brings to our kids. This is a way to make sure those opportunities are made available to more kids. So it's the Music Education Fundraiser on Sunday from 4 until 7:30 at the Jazz Room. Check out kwkiwanismusicfestival.com for details and your tickets. I'm going to keep it in that theme for a moment here since we're talking about music. You probably know that every Friday on this show is an all request Friday where we play a little bit of the song that you request. And we like to attach a theme to it. And I'm thinking, you know what? We are into Giving Tuesday week, right? Giving Tuesday is tomorrow. So how about we keep that theme going right through Friday, and your all request Friday theme will be giving songs. You know, like Give Me Shelter, Give a Little Bit, or whatever else the theme of giving means to you. I just gave you a couple of little ideas. You always come up with far more creative ideas than that. So your all request Friday theme this week in honor of Giving Tuesday tomorrow is giving. You figure out what that means to you. Make your request by sending me an email, mike@570news.com, or call in anytime and just make your request to Devin, who is on the other side of the glass today. Let them know what song you want to hear. All Request Friday, the Giving Songs edition in honor of Giving Tuesday. An update is on the way from the 570 News Center. And then, well, if you didn't have enough music already, how about our weekly feature on Mondays at 11 a.m. This week in music history? Musicologist Brian Allison joins us for some great stories of what happened on This Week in Music History. That is coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I think some of the performers, not to mention the fans, at a Rolling Stones concert on This Week in Music History were saying, give me some shelter, not because of bad weather or anything that might have been happening on stage, but because of who was hired to do security for that particular concert. But we'll get there. Just one of the tidbits this week on the regular feature, This Week in Music History. We're joined by Brian Allison, who's a good friend and musicologist. He also has a Facebook page of the same name I want you to be aware of, This Week in Music History. You can follow along there to get all of these stories and more. The Facebook page is This Week in Music History as Brian Allison, our musicologist, joins the show. Good morning, Brian.
Hi, Mike.
This week in 1976, somebody thought it would be a good idea to put the Sex Pistols on live TV?
They did, and it didn't go over well.
Shockingly.
Well, I mean, it built them as a legend, but yeah, it was quite a moment in music history for sure. So the story is it's December 1st, 1976. The Sex Pistols are rehearsing for their upcoming tour, and somebody comes in and says, how would you guys like to go down and do the Today Show? And the Today Show was a regular daytime talk show, variety show. Queen had actually been scheduled to be on the show, but Freddie Mercury had an emergency trip to the dentist, and they couldn't make it. So they thought, who can we get? Well, there's this young upcoming band that are kind of creating a stir. Let's get them to come out. Didn't end well, as I said. So the host of the Today Show was Bill Grundy. He was visibly and admittedly intoxicated as he interviewed them. And he started to make some lewd comments to a then unknown Susie Sue, who was actually standing behind the band. He made some remark to her, and Steve Jones, the guitarist, basically called him out and called him a dirty old man, and then swore a couple of times. And, Grundy egged him on and encouraged him to do more, and he swore some more, and it was just this huge, the air turned blue, basically. So, the show was promptly cut short. The police were called. The phone lines lit up like Christmas trees. And this built the legend of punk rock in the UK. And, the press just ran with it, as they tend to do in England. The headlines were The Filth and the Fury and Filthy Lucre, which I found really interesting because subsequently those two headlines became the title of the Sex Pistols' official documentary in 2000, which was called The Filth and the Fury. And then when they reunited in 96, what did they name their tour? The Filthy Lucre Tour. So they took their leads from the press, and it just built them as a legend. But yeah, what a moment.
I love it. Okay, let's stay in the 70s. This week in 1978, You Don't Bring Me Flowers reached number one.
Wow, what a hit for Neil Diamond and Barbra Streisand. And the history behind this is really interesting because it didn't start off as a duet. Both Neil Diamond and Barbra Streisand had recorded You Don't Bring Me Flowers independently. And there was a radio DJ in Louisville, Kentucky, and he decided that he was going to do a recording of both of those songs combined as a gift to his wife. she really liked the song, and he took two versions of the song, spliced them together, gave them to her on a cassette tape. Somehow, this version got back to Neil Diamond, and when he heard it, he thought, wow, this is really great. Plus the fact that the meshed version that this DJ created became a favorite on the station's request line. People were calling in and saying, "Can you play that duet by Neil Diamond and Barbra Streisand? It's fantastic." So it got back to Neil Diamond, and he thought, "Well, we need to go and re-record this." And him and Babs went into the studio, and within a week of its release, it hit number 1 in the U.S. and number 5 in the U.K. So don't let anybody tell you that radio DJs don't influence artists, because they do.
And they certainly, if you go back to the Alan Freed and Payola days, they influenced a whole heck of a lot more and lined their pockets at the same time. But that's a whole other story.
That is the other story for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, this week in 1996, Brian, we lost Tiny Tim.
Yeah, sad story. I mean, Tiny Tim was sort of a novelty performer. He had this hit, Tiptoe Through the Tulips, and this famous falsetto voice that he sang in, and he played the ukulele, and people thought he was kind of humorous. And he actually passed away on stage. He had a heart attack while performing on November 30th, 1996. He was literally singing Tiptoe Through the Tulips when he had this heart attack and passed away on stage. So, and I got to thinking, like, this is really not as unusual as people think it might be. There have been quite a few performers who have died on stage. You go back to 2004, the tragic incident where Dimebag Darrell of Pantera fame was fatally shot while he was performing on stage. A singer named Leslie Harvey of the Stone Crows was electrocuted on stage in 1972. He touched an ungrounded mic and was zapped and subsequently died. You've got Nick Menza, who was in Megadeth at one point. He died while performing in 2016. There's quite a long list, if you Google it, of performers who have actually died on stage. The most interesting one I found was a fellow named Colonel Bruce Hampton, who was a very prominent musician in Atlanta. He died on stage in 2017 at his own 70th birthday concert.
Oh, my gosh.
So they gave this guy a tribute concert to celebrate his 70th birthday, and he had a heart attack and died on stage while performing. So it was just kind of this tragic event for sure. So, yeah, it happens more than you think. But I remember the death of Tiny Tim for sure. That one stands out.
I guess if you're a musician and you go in the midst of a performance, that's probably one of the better ways.
A lot of folks would say,
Sure.
what, died doing what he most liked to do.
Exactly. All right. When I was a young lad, Brian, I thought that Lorne Greene was just the guy on Bonanza. But it turns out on This Week in Music History, he was doing more than just showing up on a number 1 TV show.
He was so much more, Lorne Greene. Yeah. I mean, the late Lorne Greene, he was kind of a Canadian staple in terms of acting and some of the parts that he did. Of course, he was on Bonanza for years. But people might remember that he was also a recording artist. And in 1964, December the 5th, he took a song that he had recorded called Ringo to the top of the charts. It went to number 1 in the U.S. single charts, and that made him the second Canadian in history to have a U.S. number 1 single at that time. The first, of course, being Paul Anka had broken through a few years before with a number 1 single. But Lorne Greene was the top of the charts. So, yeah, there's some trivia that you can throw at your friends. What star of Bonanza also had a number 1 hit on the U.S. charts in 1964? It's Lorne Greene.
Absolutely love it. Just a little bit of the behind-the-scenes information you get every week with Brian Allison, our good friend and musicologist, who joins us for This Week in Music History. Find the Facebook page that Brian operates of the same name. This Week in Music History, you'll get a whole bunch of stories just like the ones you're hearing this morning. And after this quick break, we'll come back with a trifecta of rock royalty stories. We're talking The Who. We're talking Zeppelin. We're talking the Stones on This Week in Music History here on the Mike Farwell Show. Stay with us. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every Monday morning at 11, we take a little trip down a musical memory lane with This Week in Music History. We are guided on this tour by our good friend and musicologist Brian Allison, who also operates a Facebook page of this same name. This Week in Music History, so you'll get a full list of these stories and so many more interesting tidbits if you follow along on Facebook. This Week in Music History. And Brian, it was on This Week in Music History that Led Zeppelin announced it was no longer as a band.
Yep, 1980, December the 4th. So 2 months after John Bonham, their drummer, had passed away, Led Zeppelin made a press announcement and said that they were going to discontinue the band. The press statement read, "We wish it to be known that the loss of our dear friend and the deep sense of undivided harmony felt by ourselves and our manager have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were." So Led Zeppelin effectively ended on that date. Now, there have been some reunions of sorts between the original three guys over the years. There was the famous one that happened at Live Aid, which did not go well. And then there was a few later on as well. But truly, Led Zeppelin ended on December 4th, 1980. It was officially announced. Interesting question. I think you and I have even touched on this before. Should bands continue after the death of a key member? You've got some bands who have done it. You've got AC/DC, Def Leppard, The Who, the Rolling Stones, Rush, all, have done very well, or will do very well, I'm sure, having lost a key member. And then you've got others who have packed it in. You've got Nirvana, you've got The Doors, you've got Sublime, The Grateful Dead, Joy Division, all said, you know what, we're not going to do this, just like Led Zeppelin did. So what's the right answer? Do you think bands should continue, or should they pack it in after they've lost a key member?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brian, and I'm not sure there is a right answer, but the purist in me, as much as I love Geddy and Alex, I think we should say yes, that bands should pack it in after the death of an original member, and they can come back and do music under a different band name, but are you really Rush if Neil Peart is not on your kit? I don't know.
I agree totally. I think, come back for sure. You're a musician. You're an entertainer. That's what you do.
Exactly.
People want you to continue to do that. But maybe retire the name out of respect for the band member who's died. You could do Rush 2.0. That would not offend me at all. Or you could come up with a whole new name if you felt pressed to do that. But yeah, I kind of feel the same as you do. I'm like, but it's not the same band anymore. It's a different band. So give it a new moniker and continue to do what you do best.
Well, and that's to the other side of this same argument, because we completely agree that you are a musician, you are an entertainer. So just because tragically you lost a friend and bandmate doesn't mean you're going to stop performing and playing. So, how do you tell somebody that you can't be that band name anymore? It's not your fault that somebody tragically passed away. So it's honestly, I think it comes down to, is there a right answer? Probably just a personal preference here.
For sure, 100%.
Yeah. All right. This week in 1979, this story will forever resonate with me, not because I was anywhere near understanding it as a kid. I would have been 8 years old at the time. But because WKRP did an episode about it, and I thought it was one of their best episodes because it happened in Cincinnati. The sitcom, of course, WKRP in Cincinnati.
Yeah, for sure. I remember that episode well, too, and thinking it was very cool that they touched on it. But what a tragic event. So December 3rd, 79, The Who were playing at Riverfront Coliseum in Cincinnati, and there was a festival seating. This was back in the days when promoters had festival seating, where seats are basically available on a first-come, first-served basis. So what happens? People show up hours and hours before the event. They want to be near the front of the line, and they want to get in as quickly as possible to get a spot near the front. Who wouldn't want that? What happened with the Who event was that the band came out really late to do a sound check. It was like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and fans had been lined up outside. There was thousands of people waiting to get in. They heard the band doing sound check and thought, oh, the show's starting. So they started pushing, and eventually the doors gave way, and hundreds of fans spilled in, rushed into the venue, and trampled those who fell. And 11 members of the audience were trampled to death. Another 26 were injured after this stampede. So it was just an awful event before the concert even got started. To this day, Pete Townsend, the guitarist for The Who, of course, he can't talk about the event without becoming visibly shaken. It was so tragic to him that young rock fans would come to see a show and have a good time, and that 11 of them wouldn't go home that night. He can't even speak of it. But there was some good that came out of it. The tragedy did change the way concert promoters used festival seating, with many of them moving on to reserved seating only and abandoning that practice of festival seating, first come, first serve.
I thought that episode of WKRP in Cincinnati was so poignant because it felt as though they crammed as much comedy as they could into the first 10 to 12 minutes. And then after the commercial, you came back and it was a much more somber show, sitcom, because it was the morning after this terrible tragedy the night before.
Yeah, I'd love to see that episode again. Are any of the streaming services showing WKRP in Cincinnati?
They are not, my friend. But, it's been on my mind forever. We still have to get together for a drink one day after the show. I could bring you the DVD because I have the copies at home.
Oh, you have the full series on DVD?
I do indeed.
Outstanding. Yeah, I would love to see that because I loved that show. It was one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's one of the best for sure. Okay, one final note on this week in music history, and it goes back to the very beginning. I started with Gimme Shelter by the Stones because on this week in 1969, a few people probably could have used a little bit of shelter at a Stones concert.
Oh, what a mess. Yeah, we're going dark today, aren't we?
We are a little bit.
So December 6, 1969 was the date of the infamous Altamont concert that the Stones gave in California. So the Stones had decided to do this free concert, and it was billed as the West Coast Woodstock. So they thought, we're going to have this free concert, peace and love. People are going to come out. It's going to be a great time in the spirit of the 60s. It turned out to be pretty much anything but that. So the bill was that the Stones were going to play. Jefferson Airplane was on the itinerary. Santana, the Flying Burrito Brothers, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. It sounded like a really great bill, and I think the Dead were scheduled to play as well. So a lot of people came out there. By the time the show was getting ready to start, there was about 300,000 people there. So big show. The Stones had decided to use the Hells Angels biker gang to provide security for the event. Not sure why they came up with this decision. We know that the Grateful Dead had used them to some success at their shows. They were paid in beer, which probably wasn't a great idea. And by the time the show started, a lot of them were fairly drunk and belligerent, and it just went from bad to worse. So the first band to perform was Jefferson Airplane. One of the Hells Angels literally knocked out Marty Balin, their guitarist, on stage while he was performing, out cold. So that was the end of their set. The Grateful Dead were watching from the sidelines, and they bailed. They said, we're not going on. This looks like a really bad deal. They got on the helicopter, and they got out of there. And the day went on and just got worse and worse. By the time the Stones hit the stage, there had been all kinds of incidences, drug overdoses. It was just a mess. And then during the Stones set, a young concertgoer named Meredith Hunter, he was stabbed to death by the Hells Angels right in front of the stage, about 30 feet from the stage. It's claimed that he was waving a revolver around. There was a long investigation afterwards. I don't believe anybody was ever actually charged for that death. But, it was just a horrible day. One guy drowned trying to get to the concert in a ditch somewhere. One woman had her skull crushed after somebody threw a full can of beer through the air. 2 men were killed in a hit-and-run accident, and 2 babies were born.
Born at the concert?
At the concert. And there were allegedly dozens and dozens of reported cases of sexual assault and rape and countless drug overdoses. And it just was... it's largely considered to be the day the 60s died. The Stones basically killed the peace and love generation. They eventually made it into a movie. If you've ever seen Gimme Shelter, it documents the whole event. It was kind of their attempt to repair their reputation after Altamont, but what a mess.
Just like putting the Sex Pistols on live TV in 1976, hiring the Hells Angels as your security, what could possibly go wrong, Brian?
Poor choice, for sure.
Poor choice, all around.
And the Stones, for years later, were looking over their shoulder because they were worried about retribution after, because they had to come out and basically say, yeah, the Hells Angels were out of line. They were doing some terrible stuff during our show. We didn't want them to do that, but we hired them, so we take the responsibility for it. But the Hells Angels weren't happy about being disrespected by the Rolling Stones, so Keith and company had to kind of watch their backs for a few years after.
Music history, the gift that keeps on giving. Love talking about it every week with you, Brian. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Talk to you next week, Mike. Thank you.
Brian Allison, our good friend and musicologist, joins us every Monday morning at 11 for This Week in Music History, which you will also find on Facebook by that same name. This Week in Music History, lists of these stories and so much more on a weekly basis. This Week in Music History is on the Mike Farwell Show every Monday morning at 11. And on this show every Monday morning at 11:30, Drewe's Views will find out what they are coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? I haven't seen hide nor shaggy head of that boy in 4 years. But you'd know him if you met him. Played harmonica like the cat lost his balls. Yep, Crazy Dave. Had a toothy smile as big as my hand. Always chewed on a toothpick or a long blade of grass, drank from the bottle, rolled the worst cigarettes, was impervious to insect bites. It's one of the best damn tree-planting highballers east of Prince George.
That is our good friend, David Drewe. I mean, there might be some poetic license taken there by Scott Wicken. He wasn't specifically talking about David Drewe.
He didn't even know me when he wrote that.
But it seems...
It was a premonition.
It seems appropriate. A premonition or a bad dream, one or the other. David Drewe is a former Conservative Party staffer. He is now the owner, operator of Negotiating Change, Government Relations, Stakeholder Engagement Strategies. He joins us every Monday morning at 11:30 for Drewe's Views. Nice to see you. How you feeling after all the shoveling?
I'm surprisingly able to walk and drive, but I am... It's not, the first step is the hard one. Once I get going, I'm walking normally, but, standing up, sitting, getting out of the car in the parking lot just now, I was like, oh my God, I wish young me could see me doing this. And anyway.
Yeah, our young selves would be laughing a lot at us today.
Yeah. It's like, I understand that now.
Exactly. Okay, let's get into the issues du jour, including Stephen Guilbeault. Listen, I'll tell you this. I admire a man of principle, and clearly he's got some.
Oh, absolutely, And I don't even really want to talk about him so much as this is a huge impact. And to put it in perspective, Danielle Smith and Mark Carney had just announced this grand strategy to work together on pipelines. And then at the UCP convention that weekend, they are cheering from the podium. A minister of the Alberta government is getting cheers from the podium celebrating Stephen Guilbeault's resignation. It's like, is this a way the partnership works? Now, on the other hand, if you talk to the campus liberals, he is one of the biggest draws that the Liberal Party had, just because everybody understands his purity on the issues. And he came into it as issues first, not politics, and then what am I going to do when I get there sort of stuff. And then there's the whole environmental credibility thing. So, as a conservative, capital C, I'm so glad to see the end of that guy. As a small C conservative pragmatist, I'm not so sure, though. If that wing of the Liberal Party is not on board, they now have the focal point to not even register against Mark Carney's leadership, but to really slow things down and to have the courage to point out the flaws in the policy going forward. I thought it was kind of funny. The NDP their leadership candidates were pretty quick to say that Stephen Guilbeault's not welcome in our party. And it's like, Stephen Guilbeault left cabinet. He has announced he's planning on staying as a member of the Liberal caucus, presumably so he can still be a pain in the butt on the issues he cares about. And though, like you said, credit to a dude who stands by his principles. But, if there's all these other people who were around for 10 years and actually did believe what they said as opposed to what they're saying now, they have a little bit more room to slow things down. And as the guy who wants to see the pipeline get built, I'm not sure how I feel about Stephen Guilbeault leaving cabinet. That's the complicated, long view on it.
All right. That's Drewe's views, and those are exactly the kinds of views that we want to hear. Let's stay with Danielle Smith and the UCP, the United Conservative Party, for a moment, because you made mention of that convention, and now she's got a pipeline proposal to talk about.
Well, she has the framework for a pipeline proposal. I mean, to quote David Eby, there's no proponent, there's no route, there's no oil to pump through it. So is it a proposal? Well, considering all the upset it's causing, you'd think it was a real proposal. But when she got up at the UCP convention and started talking about this, first time she mentioned the pipeline, it did not get the applause you would have expected. It was rather polite Canadian applause. And as she started going back to it and occasionally mentioned Mark Carney's name, she was getting booed at the stage by her own party at the convention celebrating a pipeline. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, probably because they know that, as you said, there's a framework for a possible pipeline if there's a private sector proponent and a whole bunch of other things
and
down the road.
First Nations consent.
Of course.
First Nations consent.
Yes.
And I don't know if you caught the latest from David Eby over the weekend. I don't want to say he's changing his tune, but he's definitely hitting some verses more than the choruses he was last week. It's really refined down now to not at that port. There will be no pipeline going to that port. Anything else is on the table pretty much. And he's realized, I think, over the past couple of weeks, he's really come through as the blocker guy. And now, rather than being the guy who's saying this isn't going to happen, he's very much focused on not that port, First Nations consent. And it almost sounds like if First Nations consented to that port being opened, he'd go along with it. It's just they've got so many billions of dollars in projects depending on the agreement they have right now that could all be blown up if shipping traffic starts going through that port.
Isn't this the equivalent of giving a child what it wants to keep it quiet for a while?
Well, okay, so there's part of me that wants to give all the goodwill in the world to Mark Carney on this. And then there's part of me that wants to celebrate him in the way that I would celebrate Stephen Harper for pulling off this Machiavellian move, which is basically to say, you got a problem with pipelines? Pick your fights with Eby. I'm on side with you. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm not going to do anything. Like this whole major projects office, well, it was going to help with financing. Not for the pipeline. It was going to be help with securing agreements from stakeholders. Not in the case of this pipeline, apparently. So, he's really pulled off a good little, I haven't really changed our position on anything, because it's not like Justin Trudeau was going to be saying no to a pipeline that had First Nations consent and BC's consent. So I credit him as a Machiavellian politician, but I want to give him the goodwill that this is a well-meaning step in the right direction. And the worst case scenario is this is just another liberal Justin Trudeau thing where it's all about the announcement and wait for nothing.
Okay, how does our Minister of Energy and Natural Resources fit into all of this?
Oh, okay. Tim Hodgson, I'm not going to say a bad word about the guy, but there were some First Nations who were concerned about inadequate consultation because they were 2,400 kilometers away from the nearest meeting to tell him their views on the pipeline-y sort of stuff. And he was being interviewed about it, and he told, I think it was the guest host of it was CBC Power and Politics, and he said, it's called Zoom. We're using it right now. My gosh. That was not a bright, sensitive thing to say, but the reaction to it, you'd think he'd have made a reference to alcoholic Indians. It was just played out to be the most insensitive thing ever and a sign of bad faith and And it's like, oh, Tim Hodgson, welcome to politics. No, but really, this reaction that he got, it's not that they were so genuinely offended. It's that this was their window to get attention to their views. This is politics. He made a bad joke, and it's like, I'm sorry, even in any context, if he was a businessman, that would have been a bad joke. But it was a bad joke. My gosh. How many have I told on the air here, Mike?
Let me count the ways, David.
So he just has learned that making a bad joke, it's not going to be treated as a bad joke. It's going to be treated as the end of the world and a sign of bad faith because you're now in politics, buddy.
David Drewe joins us every Monday morning at 11:30 to share his views on various issues. We've got public transit, our public school board, and public sector job cuts. Still to discuss. Stay with us. It's the Mike Farwell Show and Drewe's views on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. He is currently the owner, operator of Negotiating Change, where you can get support for government relations and stakeholder engagement strategies. In a previous life, a Conservative Party staffer serving alongside Harold Albrecht, former Kitchener-Conestoga MP. He is David Drewe. He joins us Monday mornings, 11:30, for Drewe's Views. I said to you during the commercial break, David, that I was glad to see you bring this story forward for discussion today because I learned something. I happened to be flipping the channels, came across CBC News World on the weekend, and the headline question for Cross Country Checkup was, are you afraid to use public transit given the increases in violence? And I just kind of rolled my eyes and said, oh, big city problems. But apparently not. Well, we're a big city. I should just get used to that too. But anyway, not the biggest of cities, but ours also showing increases.
Well, if we weren't a big city before, a 40% increase in public transit violence certainly says we are now, Mike. And I say that in that sarcastic tone, but this used to be a Toronto thing. Then it was a Toronto-Vancouver thing and a Winnipeg thing, and you started hearing stuff about Montreal and Ottawa. And while I was working for Harold Albrecht on the Hill, Canadian Urban Transit Association would be coming in every year on their lobby day, and you'd have people from Grand River Transit and others. And this was, well, we're in 2025 now, and I left politics at the very, very end of 2014. So it was at least 11 years ago that they were coming in citing violence on public transit as a big issue then. And at that point, it was about things like fare collection because the bus drivers were afraid to challenge anyone because of the possible. And then there was just the general abuse of escalation. So they were looking sort of, do not quote me on the specifics of a 12-year-old policy that really was never at the top of the priority pile for me, but it was basically to treat bus drivers and transit operators like police officers in terms of you assault one of them, there are extra penalties applied, so to speak. But here we are now, and I don't even remember if they got what they wanted or not. But here we are now, a decade, we've had a 40% increase locally on violence. And I don't know what exactly that means because, you know, they say if you take this drug, heart medication, it's going to cut your risk in half. And it's like, oh, so instead of 0.005%, it's going to be 0.0025% now? Like, what is the real relative of 40% increase? I don't know. But what do we do about it? I do not want us to end up like Toronto where people are afraid to take the LRT or be out there alone. Now, like, we haven't seen the severity of crazy violence around here. But let's not wait for it to happen before we start trying to solve the problem. Let's not do that traditional government-y thing where I was going to say liberal because they are the worst for it, but every government would rather somebody else solve a problem later if it's not really a problem yet. So you tend to focus on the tall dandelions, and this isn't that big a problem yet.
I like the idea. Proactive helps, and the data is there to back up the need for some proactive policies here. Okay, let's turn to our public school board and Waterloo Region record columnist Louisa D'Amato. If there were a heavyweight title fight with the billing D'Amato v. WRDSB, you're going D'Amato all the way?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's, as a ratepayer, I think it's basically fair information for us to know what the costs were for that entire Carolyn Bukowski fiasco. We have her costs, the board's costs for, I don't remember how many levels of complaint there were on that. Then there's this whole thing around Mike Ramsey being silenced by the board and the people who voted for him being left unrepresented. There were expenses on both sides of that as well. All for nothing. This was all about a tempest in a teapot, some petty, petty egos, and we do not know how much as taxpayers it cost. So, my gosh, we're worried that if the province takes over school boards, we're going to lose accountability? That ship sailed. We have no accountability. The average citizen could not name a member of the school board. Honestly, I can really only name Scott Pietkowski because he was the center of all of that attention that he became. And also, he was a household name for stealing voter lists from the NDP in his school board run, too. But there's no accountability there. So, yeah, why do we need them? We definitely don't need them in their current form. Right now, it's people who would rather be in the headlines. I'd rather have bureaucrats who are interested in staying out of headlines running the school board.
It's a good way to look at it. And Mike Ramsey, of course, a name you just mentioned, also a long-time public servant for the school board as a trustee.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and, you know, I don't believe his behavior was perfect at all. But there's no way we should be spending taxpayer money on both sides of these arguments.
I love what you said. All for nothing. Honest to goodness gracious. To cut off a presentation midway through and then
citing the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is the wrong end of the telescope.
Yeah. And here we are 3 years later, and only thanks to a persistent member of the public.
A Toronto member who had no skin in the game, was just curious how this compared against a similar situation in Toronto.
Exactly.
But yeah, why? Why does it take somebody having to file a Freedom of Information request and wait this long to find out how much money our trustees wasted on ego trips?
That's what they were. Great point. Finally, to our federal public service and the restructuring that I think we are at least anticipating with Mark Carney. There has been the talk about 40,000 cuts across the public service, but Anita Anand says, don't worry, it's not going to impact the service that we as Canadian citizens get from our federal government.
She was speaking, to be fair, specifically about consular services, and we're not going to suffer a cut in consular services because of the cuts. And I understand why they lie. But I really want these politicians to come out and say, yeah, it is going to hurt. It's necessary. This is your chemotherapy. We've been chain smoking on waste and stupid spending for so long. We have to cut. And it's not going to be fun. It's not supposed to be fun. And the idea that we could have done this all along without it hurting, well, why did you wait so long? Of course it's going to hurt. Of course people are going to, I don't want to say suffer, but they are going to be less well off. There are going to be cracks in the system exposed. It's not like, yeah, there's waste in government. We all know there's waste in government, but it's also incredibly hard to find waste and define it. You know, the idea that 18 bureaucrats need to touch a memo, is that waste? Oh, yeah, I think so. But it's also making sure that this complicated machine of government doesn't have a wrench cog thrown in the wheels. You know, it's a complicated thing. And my idea of waste would probably be someone else's idea of a lack of democracy. It's not as easy. And yeah, if you are going to cut, it's going to hurt. You can't say that we're going to triple, I think it is, defense spending. So, and we're not going to touch transfers to the provinces. We're going to make cuts on this level in this amount of bureaucrats and this amount of spending, and it's not going to hurt. I'm in favor of the cuts, generally speaking. I'm not saying I don't want them to happen. But to sit here and tell Canadians this is not going to hurt, is this going to come back and bite us in the butt later? No, this is a time of sacrifice. This is going to hurt. We are going to do our best to be behind you to make sure it hurts as little as possible. But we need to cut. This is not going to be fun. That's where we are. And to sugarcoat it and say, oh, don't worry, it's all going to be fine with cuts on this level. And by the way, even cuts on this level, I still don't think it's austerity.
I couldn't agree more.
You know, when you're spending $100 billion more than you have coming in, it's not austerity to go to $80 billion.
Right. You said something at the beginning.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. You said, I understand why they lie. And I'm sure you picked your words with intent. But I want to explore that a little further. Are you going to stick around today for some phone calls?
Sure.
I love that. David Drewe, who joins us every Monday morning, 11:30, to share his views on Drew's Views, says, you know what, today I'm going to stick around after the noon update. It's rant or rave time, and we have open phone lines for you. So engage in the conversation with me and David. Questions, comments, rants, raves, and I want to explore more.
Any thoughts, any anecdotes?
We can definitely have a few anecdotes, but I want to know why David knows that they lie. Why do they lie? That's my rant I'm going to start with. Rant or rave coming up. David Drewe sticks around on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage out of sight, or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
And thus we begin a Monday tradition here on the program. Open phone lines for you to rant and or rave. You rant because you're upset. You rave because you ain't. And our good friend David Drewe has said, you know what, I'm sticking around for the first 30 minutes of rant or rave today because he loves hearing directly from you. Phone lines already getting busy, so I'll get right to them. But I did promise I wanted to come back to this point because it is a rant that I have. You said, David, during Drew's Views moments ago, that you understand why they lie. They being the politicians. I assume you said that because the answer is the truth will hurt too much and they don't want to share the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But you know better than I. Why did you say that?
I'll be more cynical than you. They lie because they know if they don't lie, we will believe someone who is. If they come out and say, cuts are going to hurt, somebody else is going to come out and say, well, then the cuts aren't necessary or worth it. Or we could do it a different way. We can do what Woolwich and Wilmot did 10 years ago and ignore the advice of what's going to happen if we don't act. And there's always someone who's going to propose an easy path. And we as voters will vote for the easy path. That's why we have an $80 billion deficit in the first place. I'm sorry, I just took on a very school-marmy tone with you, and I didn't mean it.
No, it's quite all right, because now I'm even more upset. Now I'm rantier than I was when I started.
No, and that's just it. The problem is us. The problem is us as voters thinking that there is no cost to spending more than we have coming in year after year after year. And no, I'm not worried about Canada going bankrupt. But I am looking at, of course Canadians feel like they're not getting value for their tax dollars because, what is it, 40% about of our tax dollars go to debt payments? Just the interest? So of course we don't feel like we're getting value for our money. We're getting 3/5 of the value for our money because 2/5 of it was spent by previous generations. So what's our solution? We're going to leave 40% for future generations.
Yeah, because we can't see past our own time horizon. That's why. I'm only going to be here till 2050. What do I care?
Yeah, but quite honestly, though, you're going to have two politicians offering you solutions. One of these solutions is going to hurt.
I hope I live a little bit longer than 2050 now that I say that out loud. I wouldn't even quite make 80 yet by that point. All right, phone lines open to you for rant or rave at 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-57 And remember, because phone lines are already busy, if you don't get through on one line, you can try one of the other ones because that'll sneak you in. Couple of lines still there as we dive in with Mark to start us off. Good afternoon, Mark. Rant or rave?
I've got two raves for you, Mike.
All right, Mark, let's hear them.
First of all, I was able to make it down on Saturday to meet Mr. Fritter Fred.
Fritter Fred. Apparently I was there 5 minutes after you, Mark. I just missed you.
I'm sorry I missed you. I did mention you. And you know what? He talks more than you do, Mike.
Well, now that's something I haven't heard before. Nobody talks more than me, Mark.
He's a nice guy.
He's a great guy.
Fritters were fantastic, as per usual.
And did you get some extras?
Pardon me?
Did you get extra fritters? Because you were supposed to get extra fritters if you mentioned the show.
Yeah, he topped me up. Unbelievable.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Good.
Now, second rave, Mike. My favorite segment today with Allison.
This Week in Music History?
Yes, I just love it, Mike. I think you know that. I got a story for you. You got a minute?
Absolutely.
Okay. I seen Tiny Tim live once in the late 70s.
Where? In the Tulips?
At the Coronet Hotel on Victoria Street.
The old Coronet, eh?
Tiny Tim played, I think it was about a 2-hour performance, and actually he was very good, Mike.
Mark, I love it. I really appreciate the story. Going back, we talked about this last week on the show, a Throwback Thursday, the pubs we used to know. A lot of people. I went to the Coronet for the music, of course. Nothing else that was going on there at any given time along the way.
My favorite pub that no longer exists was the Duke of Somerset in Ottawa at the corner of Bank and Somerset, a basement bar with live music 6 nights a week. I discovered that on my first work term in Ottawa, and I was probably there 6 nights a week on my work terms in Ottawa.
This Week in Music History, we learned that Tiny Tim died on stage, had a heart attack while performing on stage. What a way to go.
Ew.
I know. We got a little dark on This Week in Music History this week, but that's what happens sometimes. Sean is next on Rant or Rave. Farwell's Force, official member number 165. Good afternoon, Sean.
Good afternoon. I have two thoughts here. First thought, I would like to thank David Drewe for confirming something that I've thought for a long time. The average person just isn't smart enough to have democracy. Sorry.
We don't deserve democracy?
Not smart enough.
Okay.
David Drewe just confirmed that for me. Thanks. Now, the other thing I was thinking about, okay, so Mark Carney, he's a smart guy. He's a technocrat. And so we're talking pipelines, cutbacks, military. I can't help but think that if we still had a progressive conservative party federally instead of a reform party masquerading as a conservative party, he would have fit better into the old PC party than as a liberal, quite frankly.
All right, Sean, thanks for the thoughts. David, first, do you want to atone for your actions of pointing out that we're too stupid to have nice things?
I don't think we're stupid. Honestly, if you study cons, smart people are more likely to be the victims of cons than stupid people. And there's actually a lot of academic articles about this, and it's something about smart people think they are smart enough to avoid. It's not that we are stupid. It's that we are easily manipulable. It's like, 20 years ago, you'd leave the lights on when you weren't home to fool the burglars. It's kind of like that now. My gosh, what Trump is doing with Venezuela is almost a perfect example of this, where for 3 months he's been talking about, illegal immigrants in taking over buildings in Chicago and this, that, and the other thing. He has othered Venezuela so well that when he's using military planes to shoot down civilian boats, everybody's like, yeah, but he's fighting evil. We are cueable. We tend to follow flashy things and motion as opposed to things that are still and gray. I don't think we're stupid. I think that we are smart enough that we are playable.
Okay. And what about the fact that Sean thinks Prime Minister Carney would fit very nicely in the old Reform Party?
No, old PC Party.
Old PC Party, pardon me, yes.
Sure. I also think he'd fit very well in today's Conservative Party, though.
I think we have the Conservative Party federally, don't we?
We do.
Yeah.
No, but I think he'd fit very well in that.
Sure.
They're having trouble finding reasons to oppose a lot of what he's doing. He's doing what the Conservative Party of Canada has been calling for the last decade. He has dismantled the Trudeau legacy. I mean, remember feminist foreign policy even? Where's that now? So much, he has totally dismantled. And it's very, very fair for people to say, oh my gosh, the Conservative Party has changed from what it used to be. But so has the Liberals.
Absolutely.
So has the NDP. It's called evolution. I will admit that I'm not as happy with the Conservative Party of today as I was with the Conservative Party of 10 years ago. But that's not a reform thing. That's a they've grown and I've grown, and we haven't grown exactly along the same lines. I think Mark Carney could fit in. I think he's a harder fit in the Liberal Party than in the Conservative Party, to be honest. Like, all of a sudden, all these people who wanted carbon taxes, who were against pipelines, capital gains increases, feminist foreign policy, all the stuff that they've been talking about for the past 10 years, he's jettisoning. And he's jettisoning it in favor of the Conservative Party platform. I don't know that he needs to lead the Conservative Party of Canada, but he might be making it redundant.
All right, we'll squeeze in one more before the break. Jersey Bill is next on Rant or Rave. Hello, Billy.
Yeah, I have a rant, yeah. So, well, you know what? As a soldier, one of the places I went to my unit was we were evaluating different units, and one time we went out to West Virginia. So I saw some of this West Virginia National Guardsmen, and they didn't need to be put in harm's way in those two that unfortunately one was killed as, one is still fighting for his life. And they didn't need to be there in Washington, D.C. They need to be back home, being ready to deal with natural disaster emergencies and maybe civil disturbances in their home state. That's what the National Guard is supposed to do. And then, as Mr. Drewe just said, this nonsense of what's happening in with the Venezuelan, with the boats coming out of Venezuela, it's ridiculous. And now even some Republicans are talking about some of it might be war crimes if after they disabled the boat, they went back a second time and made sure there weren't any survivors.
Rand Paul.
What's next?
Not just any Republicans. It's senior ones like Rand Paul who are starting to crack.
Right, and also what next? Is extrajudicial punishments going to be meted out, or extrajudicial policies like that going to be meted out on all countries in Latin America? And after that, might something like that similarly happen even in Canada? We can't put it past this president. And it's really unfortunate. And as far as Mr. Carney and dealing with an $80 billion deficit, one thing to say about Mr. Carney is he's a normal politician. He interacts with other world leaders in a normal way. He treated the president of South Africa with respect, and also the president of Ukraine, something that Mr. Trump seems to be unable to do. Mr. Trump wants to lead us into a new situation where there were what's the phrase where you have spheres of influence, and everybody gets to control their own sphere of influence as a dictatorship, and that's what's really bad. We can deal with these deficits, we can deal with normal political things, but we can't deal with emerging dictatorships, especially coming out of the U.S.
All right, Billy, appreciate the call and perspective as always. I saw a lot of head nodding over there, David Drewe.
You just have to think back to Trump's inaugural address where he literally said, we are going to be a growing country again. And he explicitly said growing in terms of land mass. We are going to be growing again. And it came up in 3 different ways. And that's one of the reasons when he started talking 51st state, we got our backs up. And yeah, he's saying that this is all about fentanyl in Venezuela, but there's no fentanyl coming from Venezuela. It's cocaine coming from Colombia, steadfast American ally, through Venezuela on its way to. It's not fentanyl, but fentanyl's also the pretext for how he started the disagreements with Canada. So yeah, when Jersey Bill starts saying, what's he going to do and where are we on the list? Yeah, I have a lot of wondering about that because he's said he wants to grow. He's said fentanyl is the reason for going after Venezuela, and fentanyl's also why he wants to come after us. So am I worried about way too much? Probably. But risk-reward ratios here, I'm willing to worry.
David Drewe sticking around with us for Rant or Rave today, at least the first half of it. Speak directly to him. Get your rants and or raves off your chest with one simple phone call. Jim, you're next, and there's a line open for you on the Mike Farwell Show this afternoon, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every day from noon until 1, we give you the opportunity to have your say. Get something off your chest and onto the air. Mondays, it is the Rant or Rave edition of our Talkback Hour. You rant because you're upset. You rave because you ain't. 519-570-2545, star 570, or 1-800-570-5715. Jim is next. Good afternoon, Jim. Rant or rave?
Hey, Mike, I got a rave for you.
Okay.
I just want to thank you for the heads up. My wife and I went over to the Concordia Club on Saturday, and we stopped to get some Fred fritters. And I don't know who the lady was at the front, but she sure was bubbly. Anyway, she apologized. She couldn't get the lid shut. I only ordered half a dozen. We went inside, counted them up, and there was 11 in it. So it was a good bonus.
I love that. Great to hear, Jim. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Oh, and it was hard walking through because we had one when we went inside, but then you're walking through and you can smell them coming up, and it's like, oh, my God, I just want to wolf these things down. Anyway, thanks for the heads up, buddy.
Jim, really appreciate the call. You are more than welcome. Fritter Fred at the Fritter House, part of the annual Vine Market at Concordia Club, was ready to go and said anybody that showed up on Saturday at the Vinoc Market, I got to get that right. Anyway, you go to the market at Concordia Club. It was their 5th annual for Christmas, and then the fritter truck is there, and Fred said anybody that mentions the show gets bonus fritters. Jim, here's a pro tip for next year. I get my fritters on the way out now, but I promise you I was frittering and driving on Saturday afternoon because I ain't going to let those things sit in the car and go untouched either, especially when they're fresh out of the fryer. So good. David, I have a question for you that was sent in via email to Mike at 570news.com. Phil says, ask David Drewe about the common sense revolution, voter resistance, and then support. Mike Harris loses one election, then wins on the same common sense theme. I didn't recall the loss, to be honest with you, but Phil remembers that. Oh, we just need David's mic on there, Dev.
He lost to the Bob Rae government and won as a reaction to the Bob Rae government.
Well, the Bob Rae government, I don't think the NDP has been forgiven for in this province.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair. I mean, wasn't it a Cambridge NDP member of cabinet who went to jail? I can't remember his name. Farwell? No.
Mike Farnan went to jail?
Don't quote me on the name, but I thought somebody who was like an NDP minister in that government ended up being charged and found guilty. But
that I don't recall.
But back to the question of Mike Harris and the common sense revolution. I'm not sure what do I think about him losing on it and winning on it?
Well, I think basically going back to what we were talking about before and Sean's point about, we're too dumb to deserve democracy. I guess that might lead to the question, one time we're not ready for the common sense revolution, the next time we are.
Well, I think that was kind of a neat thing because, we'd had 45 or 50 plus years of uninterrupted progressive conservative rule in Ontario.
Sure.
Then David Peterson gets elected with a minority, pulls the plug on it and gets a majority, a huge majority, pulls the plug on that early, gets called out for the skepticism. Bob Rae gets elected because voters were not ready to forgive the progressive conservatives yet and were not willing to trust the Liberals. So nobody believed the NDP was going to win. The NDP did not believe they were going to win. No, seriously. I forget his name now. The campaign manager at the time was quoted as saying, if we'd have known we were going to win, we would not have made half the promises we made. We were throwing at the wall, trying to make sure we stayed alive. So they were making all these crazy promises, and then they end up getting elected, and they have got this caucus who actually thought they were supposed to believe these promises and had spent like weeks telling constituents and voters, yes, we are going to do this and defending it. So there was a huge amount of mental buy-in. So Bob Rae looks at the books, realizes they can't get away with this stuff, and his biggest fight is with his caucus. And I got to say, he failed miserably at it. Like, I voted for him for re-election. I will freely admit I didn't vote for him the first time. But those last 2 years of Bob Rae, I saw a guy who understood that you can't have everything and was trying to make cuts in the most compassionate way possible. I rewarded him for it. I voted for Mike Harris for re-election, too, when that came around. But Bob Rae, a lot of people just looked at the numbers of what had happened to Ontario, and he was put in a bad place, too, by the Paul Martin cuts. So all of the cuts to healthcare transfers, Bob Rae had to implement in the healthcare system. So yeah, voters were ready to look back at the Conservatives again because they saw a choice between crazy spending, and responsibility. But again, if Bob Rae hadn't been so bad as Bob Rae's government, would the voters have been willing to accept that sour medicine? I'm not sure.
Thanks for sticking around today. It's been fun.
It flew by.
It goes by so quick. Rant or Rave can continue flying right after this update, taking your calls on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. The former local MPP, who was a cabinet minister in Bob Rae's NDP government back in the 1990s, that ended up charged was none other than the late Will Ferguson. The charges had nothing to do with his time in office. They were in connection to his previous job. He was ultimately acquitted of the charges. However, his political career was really unable to recover. And that was the end of that in the mid-1990s for Mr. Will Ferguson, who ended up, prior to his passing in 2011, charged again down east in Newfoundland, Labrador, because questions were asked about his background, and he was charged with fraud over $5,000. It was a complicated legacy, but the former MPP, to whom David Drewe referred before that update with Matt Hutchison, and we couldn't quite remember the name at the time, Will Ferguson was the man. This is your Rant or Rave Talkback Hour here on the program. Easy to reach us. It's just a simple phone call, 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. George is next. Good afternoon, George. Rant or Rave?
Mike, I've got a huge rant to lay on here.
Let's go for it.
Have you ever heard of the City of Cambridge curbside leaf collection?
Oh, my gosh. Yes, I have, George. Yes, I have.
That's what's happened. I'm in the North Gulch section of Cambridge. And when we got that snowfall last week, a lot of the neighborhoods had not been collected. And people mounted like a little mountain at the curbside, their leaves. So now we have these huge snow banks, and the leaves are underneath. I don't know how they're going to get them out or what they're going to do.
I'll tell you what they should do, George. They should stop doing curbside loose leaf collection. That's what they should do.
Yeah, it looks terrible in the North Gulch section. We got all these mountains of snow. It's not because we got that much snow. It's mountains of leaves, snow covered.
Yeah, George, appreciate the call. And I know that you're doing that with intent, because I think I've made very clear my position on loose leaf curbside collection. It just is sheer madness that needs to stop. It's just, and this is one of the reasons. One of the other reasons, and I've said this many times, any municipal councillor who voted to support the declaration of a climate emergency or climate crisis needs to spend a day on loose leaf curbside collection and find out all of the heavy machinery that's involved in this, all of the heavy machinery that creates emissions. Give me a ding-dang break. But it's funny, and I would love to get your thoughts on this. I shared a picture, in fact, a couple of them, on our Facebook page today, facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. And the picture is of a poor plow driver in Cambridge who had to finagle his or her way around a parked car. A parked car on the street during a snow event, which is a no-no. And I sure hope that car got its $80 ticket, or better still, towed, because the plows can't do their work. And what do you think, what kind of license should we allow plow operators in that situation? Like, I would bury the car. You would never get back into or out of the snowbank, into your vehicle or out of the snowbank if I was driving that plow. I would put so much snow around that vehicle. But what could we allow plow operators to do in situations like that? Because somebody is completely ignoring the snow event that's been declared. The other piece of it is, so we've got poor counselors in Cambridge having to deal with this. People are saying my street's not plowed. Well, it's because some jackwagon left their car parked there and the plow can't do their job. And then in other parts of the city, you get what George is talking about. The plow takes all of those leaves that were raked to the curbside and not yet collected. They just get pushed into the front of your driveway. How do you like that? What are you going to do with them now? It's so goofy. We are more intelligent beings than this, aren't we? I think we are, but current evidence points to the contrary. Anyway, would love to know your thoughts on what license we should give a plow operator when they come up on a vehicle that's not supposed to be parked on the street. Because I say fill them in. As much snow as you can pile around that car, I would pile around it. And by the way, the person that parks on the road during a snow event goes directly to jackwagon jail. That's what we do with them. Jason is next on Rant or Rave. Good afternoon, Jason.
Mike, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
A rant and a rave. I want to give a rave out to our city crews out there this past 4 days. I believe they did a phenomenal job of making sure our streets were plowed in a timely manner. And yeah, we're always going to have those jack wagons who are parking on the street, not adhering to any of the rules. We often hear the negative aspects of city staff or city crews, but I think they did a fantastic job. So that's my rave. My rant, you know what, Mike? In my lifetime, my last 35 years of being a Steelers fan, I can't remember a time where there's no direction. There's nothing. It's lifeless. I turned off yesterday's game at the beginning of the third quarter. I just don't know where the team's going. They need a wholesale change after this season. I don't know if it's going to take the coach, the GM, a whole whack of players, but they need to bottom out, get a top 10 draft pick, get a quarterback like they did with Ben, 20-something years ago, and start anew to the Steelers tradition. But yeah, so shout out to staff, our hardworking city workers, and a dish shout out to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Have a great day, Mike.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate the call. Good to hear from you. Jason and I are united in our fandom of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have been my whole life too, and I remain a fan. However, I have told you in recent weeks that though I do remain a fan, I give them 0 of my time this season because it's as bad, if not worse, in my opinion, than Jason alludes to. I was so upset by this football team for making the decision to sign the geriatric quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who I think is not only past his prime as a football player, I think he's well past his prime as a decent human being. Got no need for anybody like that. You don't need that kind of energy around your team. And the team is, in Jason's word, unrecognizable from previous versions of a football team that I have loved my whole life because they play that hard-nosed, steel curtain defense kind of in-your-face football. You love it. They just grind it out. They wear you down. And now it's just a mess. Anyway, I can't go too deep into sports other than I will just simply say we got home. I mentioned at the beginning of the show today, we had the tremendous pleasure of being at the St. Jacobs Country Playhouse, the Hildebrand Country Playhouse, part of the Drayton Entertainment Group, to see Plaid Tidings yesterday afternoon, which was just an absolute joy. Incredible performances. If you get the opportunity, please do take it because it's a great show. It'll put you just in the right mood. So there's our mood. Coming home from a great show in St. Jacobs. May have stopped at Block 3 on the way home to pick up some of my favorites, because that's what I do. Get home, and the football game was in the late first quarter. So it was just on the TV while I was puttering around, getting some work done. And at halftime, my beloved said to me, "Hey, your team's winning." I said, "Yeah, you wait. They're winning now." The quarterback is too old and too slow in every way, physically, mentally, and this whole thing is just a disaster. It's just a disaster. And they deserve everything they get. I can't believe an organization of highly paid football executives would think that this was a good idea. Very disappointed. On the other hand, our Leafies on Saturday night, huh? How about a 7-2 win for the Toronto Maple Leafs over the Pittsburgh Penguins? That came up roses for us this weekend. And I do want to echo Jason's call about the crews that got the plowing done. I mentioned this on Friday in passing. I think it's worth reiterating. I came to work in and around 6 o'clock on Friday morning. Side streets obviously had not been touched because why would they be? But I got out onto the expressway and it was as good a driving as you'd get in a spring rain. That's how much work had already been done on our expressway to make sure people could get places they needed to get on that busy stretch and fast-moving stretch of road. So I was probably down around 80 to 85, so a little bit under the posted speed limit because you're cautious out there when the snow has come like that. But tell you what, they made that way clear. There wasn't a slip or a shimmy or anything like that. So to our plow operators who on Friday morning got out there nice and early and got those roads ready for traffic on Friday morning, good on you. I know not everybody used that or needed that because they had other options or buses were canceled for schools and whatnot, but great job by the crews to get those roads ready on Friday morning. They definitely deserve a lot of credit. I hope they're resting well for the next one because there's going to be a next one. It's Rant or Rave on the Mike Farwell Show this afternoon. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I must have been having quite the case of the Mondays earlier today because in mentioning just before that commercial break here on Rant or Rave, I made reference to that big win for the Leafs. We're back now, right, Leafs fans? 7-2 over the Pittsburgh Penguins on Saturday night. And I should have known when the Leafs score 7, this is obviously one of them, right?
Played out at center, and Domi has it again. Here's Domi across the line, dropping back for Matthews. Wrist shot, scores! Austin Matthews snapping one off the top of the circle, and the Maple Leafs restore the 4-goal lead, and it's good to see the big boy back on the board.
The big boy, Austin Matthews, and when the Leafs play and Austin Matthews scores, as he so often does, I like to start the show with what I call AM on AM in the AM. AM for Austin Matthews on AM radio in the AM part of the day. It's not the start of the show anymore. My Mondays were in the way. So there's a little AM on AM in the PM for you this afternoon as the Leafs got that big win on Saturday night. Hey, you could win big, and I want to take this opportunity to remind you of that. Winning big with our 570 News Radio Tree of Hope 50-50 raffle in support of Family and Children's Services of Waterloo Region. There is a guaranteed minimum jackpot of $50,000. That's the minimum that you're going to win. I have a feeling that by the time we make the final draw, it will be much higher than that. But right now in that jackpot is $50,000 for you. And it's only going to climb from there. You can get tickets for as little as $10. And for $10, you're getting 5 numbers in that draw. Remember, you get the chance to win $50,000. That means there are $50,000 in there for Family and Children's Services of Waterloo Region. That's what we're really trying to help out. This has been a decades-long partnership at this time of year. We want to support families in our community. And what easier way to do it than by buying a 50-50 raffle ticket? So half the money goes to you, half the money goes to Family and Children's Services Foundation. Guaranteed jackpot right now of $50,000. And if you buy your ticket before this Friday morning at 8 a.m., you are eligible for our next early bird draw, which is a pair of tickets to see Ed Sheeran in Toronto next summer and $1,000 in cold, hard cash. You can win that early bird prize Friday morning at 8, and you're still in for the overall jackpot. The ticket doesn't get taken out of the draw. So what better opportunity than right now to get your tickets in the 570 News Radio Tree of Hope 50/50 raffle? Just visit FACS5050.com. FACS5050.com. Tickets start for as little as $10. You'll get 5 numbers for $10. FACS5050.com. Back to the phones here on Rant or Rave. Joe, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Mike. You know, one of my best friends is a diehard Steelers fan, and I told him at the beginning of the season, I said, this is going to be an unmitigated disaster. And he's like, oh, no, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He'll be fine, just like Brady was. Look at when he retired. I'm like, dude, he's not a Hall of Fame quarterback anymore. He's not even freaking close. He's not even a third stringer. He's so brutal. And then you see him in the game yesterday, he just like checked out mentally right at the end of the game when he handed off that ball. And that was it. He's like, wow. You could tell he's like criticizing the offensive coordinator at that point. But I digress. It's been an unmitigated disaster. I called it, Mike, and I'm sorry. It is what it is. Seattle came on Tuesday. Rangers, let's go Rangers.
I look forward to that, Joe. Thank you. And listen, I know they say hindsight is 20/20, but I'm with Joe. I'll take him at his word, and I guess you'll have to take me at mine. But I said the same thing beginning of the season. This will be an unmitigated disaster. But there is a part of me now, like I've become so numb to it. It's just so embarrassing. I'm quite frankly glad because the organization, as much as I love the Pittsburgh Steelers, deserves this. To be embarrassed like this. Aaron Rodgers, I'm so happy to watch him embarrass himself on his way out of the NFL because he's a loser. I'm sorry. I know how unkind that is, but that's what he is. I got no time for that guy. No time at all. And there was never a chance that this whole experiment was going to work. And now everybody is getting exactly what they deserve from it. Except, of course, for the poor fans, because we've been a long time here in Pittsburgh with such a proud franchise and the first franchise to get to 6 Super Bowls. And oh my goodness gracious, it feels like forever ago since we've had a meaningful winning season in Pittsburgh. So I'm glad this is happening because it's going to prompt the necessary changes that hopefully move us in the right direction. And Joe's last point, spot on. Who's up for a teddy bear toss on a Tuesday night at the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium, eh? Gonna love it. Tomorrow night, the Erie Otters in town. Josh Piercy and I will be in the David Schooley broadcast booth, bringing you all of the action. We're gonna have a great time at the good old hockey game. Tuesday night, teddy bear night, Rangers, Otters tomorrow. Can't make it there? Don't worry about it. Josh and I have you covered. Harris Law pregame show will begin at 6:30 right here on 570 News Radio. Back to the phones on Rant or Rave for Brenda. Good afternoon, Brenda.
Good afternoon. I've got a rant.
Okay.
A big one. A week ago on a news station not far from us, and I read it on X in the afternoon, the provincial and federal governments have both raked in $5.2 billion from cannabis tax revenue this year. And I'd like to know where that money is going to and what are they doing with it, because in my opinion, they should help out food banks, low-income families, and disabled seniors like myself just living on the edge. Thanks, Mike.
All right, Brenda, appreciate the call. Indeed, that is the case. Canada has collected over $5.4 billion in cannabis tax revenue since legalization, with Ontario taking in the greatest share, which is $1.5 billion. Now, remember, we're going back to 2018 when cannabis was legalized, but still many billions of dollars. All I can tell you, Brenda, because your question is valid, naturally, where is that tax revenue going? I have made the joke on more than one occasion that if you ever sit outside an LCBO outlet on a Saturday, you would wonder why we ever have to pay any taxes for anything, because we know the revenue that gets generated off those alcohol taxes, and those LCBO stores are busy, busy places. So where does all of that tax revenue go? Where does all of the revenue generated by lotteries go, which are supposed to be propping up healthcare and other things in our province and our country? I wish I had an easy answer for you, but I do know that on this end of things, it does leave us wanting, right? The questions being asked about where does all that tax revenue go anyway? As we talked about with David Drewe when he was here a little over an hour ago, about 40% of that tax revenue, federally anyway, is just going to pay interest on the debt that we have accumulated over time. And now that deficit sitting at about $80 billion. I hope you can get the help that you need, Brenda, because it sounds like you deserve it for sure. And that's going to do it for our show today. We are fresh out of time. Now you know with Rob Snow is coming up. That will be followed by All News Afternoons with Aaron Anderson and Paul McPhee. And then we'll be back tomorrow morning, starting at 9 o'clock. I hope you'll join me then. Among our conversations, problem gambling in Ontario. Do we need to cut back on the number of ads we see during sporting events? And what will the impact be of Ontario Premier Doug Ford's promise to crack down or audit funding that goes to these, quote, left-wing radical groups? We'll talk about that on the show tomorrow as well. My name is Mike Farwell. You are a force for good. Bye for now.